Minutes after 10 is the time. As it's supposed to be John Maynard Keynes that said it. Keynes, tomato, tomato. When the facts change, sir, I change my mind. What do you do? And as is often the case with these sort of mythical aperçus, there's no proof he ever actually said it. He probably did. It's the same with Margaret Thatcher and the thing about buses that we did last week. If you're still riding a bus after the age of 30, you've failed in life. No conclusive evidence that she ever said that either. But I think about it quite a lot. Was there a sitcom character? I should have asked them this before we came on air. Was there a sitcom character that changed his mind all the time? I've just got a kind of Paul Whitehouse type thing. Yeah, like, no. What was that? Paul Whitehouse? What was it? Was it the Fast Show? No. Yeah. Oh, is it the Vicar of Dibley? Is it that guy? I worry I might turn into that one day because you spend most of your life never changing your mind. You know the type. Very, very stubborn. Never going to admit they were wrong about Brexit, wrong about Boris Johnson, wrong about Donald Trump, wrong about climate change, wrong about Benjamin Netanyahu, wrong. You name it. It would be here all day. They can't. I mean, it's professionally injurious for them to admit that they're idiots, but there's loads of them around, particularly in the world of newspaper columnising. And then you sort of realise the importance of changing your mind. There is, as a very wise man once said, no point having a mind if you never change it. And then you worry, if you're anything like me at least, that you can't change your mind all the time. You've got to stick to your principles, your convictions. So what rule do you deploy to make sure that you are morally and intellectually consistent? Well, you only change your mind when either the facts have changed or your understanding of a situation has changed. I realised some time ago that Michael Gove was trying to recast the British education system, and don't hate me for saying this, but in good faith, because he thought that a system that suited him down to the ground would be the best available system. It was a real penny drop moment for me. Oddly, given how we have turned out in life, my backstory and Michael Gove's backstory are surprisingly similar. Socially mobile parents who adopted us as babies and gave us the best possible starts in life. And that's it. That's where it ends. Don't worry. But we also, I think, will benefit from a kind of post-Victorian educational structure where you can cram, you can really swat for exams. You have a facility with words, you're able to argue, and if you can do that in a parliamentary chamber or a radio studio, then you can probably do it on the page as well, which means you're going to be okay studying subjects like politics or English literature or any of the arts and humanities. You're going to be able to make a strong case in an essay, and you're going to do all right, even though you're not working anywhere near as hard as the lad over there who can build a computer from rubber bands and empty toilet roll holders. And it took me a while to realise that he had done that with the connivance of Dominic Cummings, who I'm not sure ever did anything in good faith. But it's not grounds for abuse, is it? And I know teachers will be a little bit cross with me about this, but hopefully I'm explaining. Indecisive Dave, I think, is the bloke that I was looking for, but I can't remember where that comes from. Teachers will be cross with me for suggesting this, but there is a sort of logic to it, and there's even a sort of moral consistency to it. How are you going to build a system? What are you going to use to decide whether or not a system works? Well, I think you have to be quite a remarkable individual not to use your own personal experience. I'm pretty sure if I'd never ended up sitting in this chair, if I'd never ended up in this bizarre line of work, then I never would have realised this. But we approach almost everything pretty much completely informed by our own personal experiences. You see it particularly with age. And again, I need to be a little bit less dismissive and probably on occasion, perish the thought, quite rude about older people who don't understand that the world is completely different from what it was like when they, for example, got their first mortgage. You know, the idea that because you found something easy in 1974, the people who are explaining that it's not easy now must be remiss or wrong is silly. But it's a perfectly natural position to arrive at, even if you're essentially consigning your own children and grandchildren to the remiss stroke silly pile. We all do it. And I think Tony Blair did it in 1997. Tony Blair did not come from an underrepresented background when it came to university education, any more than Michael Gove did or I did. But there is a very strong sense that heading for university was, and I still believe will be, one of the surest routes out of lower socioeconomic groups. It is one of the surest passports to progression, to mobility. I don't know why I just said always will be, is, was and always will be, because it's changing. It's really, really changing. When we talk about NEETs, and I did a magnificent, I beg your pardon, I did an interview with a magnificent person yesterday. I had a real joy. I don't think my kids have ever been more excited about an interviewee. And, you know, we've done quite a lot over the years. We've done prime ministers, Hollywood stars, massive musicians, but they were probably more excited about Amelia de Moldenberg, who you probably know best from Chicken Shop Dates. They're probably more excited about that than any other interview I've ever done. And she lived up to their loftiest expectations, brilliantly interesting and very strong on this, actually, very strong on the help that young people need to get into industries that do not necessarily have a clear academic career path. And she's more into the creative industries, but the point stands. And if the world is changing as much as it seems to be, the reason I mention NEET is because I think they're just as likely to be, quotes, middle class, end quotes, as they are to be anywhere else, to be anyone else. It's this notion of progression. I was chatting to a barrister the other day, and he was talking to me about AI and the way in which AI is already absolutely decimating the career ladder of lawyers, of barristers, because an awful lot of the crunching, the work, and listen, we know it's imperfect. Don't at me to tell me, actually, I think you'll find AI makes mistakes. Of course it does. Spoiler alert, so do humans. But it is going to do more and more of the work that would once have been a rung on the ladder. The work would have been done by someone whose job was a rung on the ladder towards the professions. So we are living in a period of extraordinary transformation, and because we are living in it, we're not properly noting or noticing it unless your face is right up against it. You are a boiled frog. And look, it's a bad analogy because the change is not necessarily entirely negative. There'll be some positives around. But the idea that you work hard at school, you get good results, you go to university, you're golden for the rest of your life is over. And that's why I wonder whether Tony Blair's 1997 mantra, education, 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 and the determination to see more and more people go into tertiary education than ever before on what were almost all academic courses, including, of course, courses that hadn't existed 20 years previously, which makes the kind of person we were talking about 10 minutes ago conclude that those courses must be worthless. I started working here. I thought media studies was a waste of time because my father was a newspaper journalist and he'd never done media studies, therefore it must be a waste of time. Have a look at how much of your friendship group or your family falls for misinformation and disinformation online, and now tell me that media studies wouldn't be a good idea. There's a reason why they teach it in every school in Estonia, because if Russia is trying to poison public discourse, gaslight and groom your population, then what you need is a proper relationship with facts, evidence and truth, and that's the kind of thing that you get taught in media studies. I didn't know that when I was a younger man, and I didn't know that when I sat here saying you might as well be teaching babby, you might as well be doing a degree in babby washing, was a phrase I used to use a million years ago. And that brings us to Andy Burnham, who is minded, clearly, to offer, well, he's not just minded, he is intending to offer technical subjects to pupils from the age of 14 in England. Manufacturing, AI, in addition to core academic learning under reforms that have been outlined. We know about the NEETs, we talk about them a lot, and we will continue to do so. But what we don't know about is the academic or educational context in which their lives have changed. I think there's a link between the two. If you think about the conversation we had yesterday, if you were listening, if you weren't, don't worry, we've had it before, and we'll have it again. A conversation about what you do with people who are detached from the world, who are perhaps frightened of the world, who just need a little bit of help. We came up with a new analogy. Is that when you're getting ready to get rid of the stabilizers on your child's bicycle, you don't just take them off and stick them on the bike. You hold them for a while until they can pedal. And we're not doing that to young people at the moment. And I think that's linked to the fact that the educational system is not preparing them for the world that they are going to enter. It is still perhaps preparing them for the world that I entered when I was their age, or that you entered when you were their age. Technical skills are somewhat unexpectedly becoming more valuable. He talks about engineers, electricians, and cybersecurity experts, but you can add other skills and trades, I think, to that list. I mean, you know, the rise of the robots is probably just around the corner, but you are probably going to be better served doing something or training to do something that can't be done by a computer, or indeed you'll be the person that is programming the computer to do the thing that needs to be done. And now we come to my problem. And this is what I want your help with this morning. And this is the unfortunate phrase, this is the touch of the Michael Goves, in that I have an almost impenetrable conviction that education sets you free. Education breaks down doors. Education is, and I mean academic education. I mean the life of the mind. I'm not very good at maths, but maths might as well be on this list alongside English literature or drama or studying poetry. It is just what gives you wings. Long before Red Bull was a thing, education gives you wings. An academic, intellectual education gives you wings. And I'm married to that idea, I think, for two reasons. The first reason is that I am adopted. And I often wonder about where my life would have gone if I hadn't had the education that I had. And, you know, I come from farming stock in County Wexford, and that's probably what would have been expected of me in life. And that may well have been great, but it would have been very different from what I did. And what I have done has been a large part, a consequence of my classical education. But the other thing is the kind of school that I went to. And here's my worry, right? So you've got 100 14-year-olds, and if they're at a school like mine, they are being taught that they can do anything. They are being taught that they can be doctors, they can be lawyers. You don't need to be top of the class, by the way, to be taught these things. You can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be a journalist. I don't know what are the sort of big jobs now, white-collar jobs that kids dream of doing. But even if you were in a relatively low academic category, the bet and the reason why parents spend a heck of a lot of money, much more now than it was when I was there 40 years ago, the reason why people do it, why they spend all that money, is because education can change you quite profoundly. Education can turn you from somebody who doesn't understand something into somebody who does. So you show me a 14-year-old who thinks that they don't like school and they want to work with their hands, and I will show you someone who may just not have had the opportunities and the education that their richer friends have had, or more privileged young people have had. And that's why I've got, what would the word be? That's why I've got a weird firewall in my brain this morning. I like a lot of what Andy Burnham is doing, and I think it comes from a place of great authenticity. For example, moving some stuff north is just brilliant for reasons that we've explored together on the programme. And I want to like this, and it makes sense to me. You've got to start teaching children things that are going to give them a clearer pathway to work. You've got to link them to local industries. You've got to recognise the skills that are going to be more valuable to them in the workplace than, for example, being able to pass John Keats. But I've still got this firewall. I've still got this gristle, mental gristle, that thinks the people who will benefit most from a classical education are the people who are not getting it. the people who will see horizons open up in front of them as a consequence of being taught the things that have nothing to do with practical or technical skills. Am I making sense? I hope I am. Because what I'm going to ask you to do now is tell me what I'm wrong about. Because I am wrong. It is obviously ridiculous to tell a 14-year-old that they have to carry on studying Shakespeare when they know that they want to be an engineer or an electrician, or they want to follow their dad into a trade. They want to be a bricklayer. I know that there's an element of snobbery attached to this as well, perhaps. I don't think I'm looking down my nose at those sort of jobs. They're probably better paid today than most white-collar jobs. I mean, being a plumber, right? That's a flipping superpower. And yet, and there's no reason why you can't be a plumber and, of course, read Dickens in the evenings or in your lunch hour. But just this idea that we distinguish between vocational and academic worries me for reasons that I think are probably bogus. They might not be, but that's where I am at 10:20 this morning. So, Andy Burnham is going to help secondary school pupils study subjects like manufacturing and AI instead of, because they'll have to drop something as well as a consequence of that. There are only a finite number of hours in the day. How would your life have been different if that had happened when you were a kid? Do you look back and wish that you'd been able to study something practical or technical? Maybe not instead of, but alongside the things that you studied. Just please, and this may sound a little odd, but I hope you know me well enough by now to know that it's entirely genuine. Just show me what this story looks like from a background that's not mine. 0345 6060 973. Married to the idea that education equals social mobility, that academics equal advancement. And remember, without being immodest, good at it. Just show me what this story looks like from a background that's not like mine. 0345 6060 973. So, A, what am I missing? And B, what can I never know through personal experience that you do? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. Just remind me or explain to me, I'm not sure which actually at this point, why we should be teaching 14-year-olds practical and technical skills, and why we actually betray them or let them down or damage them by trying to force square pegs through round holes, by treating them all as if they are prototype intellectuals. I hope I've got that over to you correctly. I hope I've made some sense there. If I haven't, we'll soon find out, because it's 10:21 and the phone lines are open. 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 10, and there it is in 2 lines and a single sentence. Phil sums up exactly the misgivings I was straining to articulate to you a moment ago. Could you imagine, he says, British Gas setting up a stand at Harrow School to recruit apprentices for pipe fitting? And that's my problem. So it's not snobbery, actually. I'm not looking down my nose at people in trades, as it were. I am just conscious of the fact that all of the things that Andy Burnham wants to teach to these 14-year-olds would be laughed out of school at Harrow or Eton or a school like mine. And I don't know why I've got such a problem with that, probably because I wasn't to the manner born. I ended up in that world very much as a consequence of my parents' efforts and ambitions. It was not a world that they grew up in or that their parents knew anything about. God knows where Dad got the idea to send me to the school that he did. But if you turned up there and said, we're going to drop Latin and we're going to teach kids how to grow up to be gas fitters, then there would be outrage. There'd be an exodus. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. And that's why I'm not cheering this announcement quite as enthusiastically yet as A, I want to, and B, I've cheered some of the other things that the new Prime Minister has done. Nick's in Wigan. Nick, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning.
Hello.
I grew up in a very northern town My father wouldn't allow me to go to university despite being offered a place, because that's not what our family did. That's not what people did in the town that I grew up in.
Gosh.
So I went out and got a job, a very technical job 30 years ago, working in IT. I was one of those geeks that had a computer at home and spent his hours after school in a computer room.
Yes.
I ended up working for the same IT company. After 30 years, I'm still there. I'm a technical guy. But during the evenings, I followed my passion and wanted to learn a little bit more of academia. I've learned about Shakespeare in my evenings while still being a technical guy. You can do both.
But your level of technical knowledge, presumably, you caught up pretty quickly with people who had gone away to university.
Yes, I've learned that having a metaphorical spanner in your hand allows you to show experience and gets you on in a technical.
So my first band was called the Metaphorical Spanners. But here's the thing. I wonder whether you're doing what I do, whether your personal experience is so acute and so specific that you think it's more relevant to the bigger picture than it actually is. Because if you'd been told at 14 that you were wasting your time with your computers and that you should have been doing something else, your life might have turned out very differently.
I'm part of a school's outreach program on behalf of my employer. I stand up in front of 16-year-olds and explain to them, if your experience shows you can do it, you'll get on in life.
But you were never told. You were never told that you weren't clever enough to do this. You were just told by your dad. See, this is what I mean, because your dad was the kind of dad that Tony Blair was trying to change. He was trying to say that people like you should be able to go to university, and people like my dad, who didn't go to university but were clearly clever enough to do so and would have benefited. Do you see what I mean? When Phil sends that message saying, can you imagine a British Gas stand at Eton recruiting apprentices for pipe fitting? It's about being told that avenues are closed to you, and your avenues were closed for very different reasons from the children that Andy Burnham is addressing. They're never going to tell 14-year-olds at Ampleforth College or Eton College that they should be thinking about a career
Not anymore. Not anymore.
No.
The times have changed. You can be that rock star. You can be that astronaut. You can stand on the moon if you want to. You have the ability. You just need to go out there and do it.
And this is, so I don't know whether we're agreeing or disagreeing. So are we telling these 14-year-olds that these avenues are not for them because their academics are not up to sniff? And if they were at better schools or fancier schools, their academics would be much better. So they wouldn't get this sentence. They wouldn't get this life sentence. Or
in the current environment, experience is useful.
Yeah, but all we're doing, and this is where perhaps I'm guilty of a little bit of snobbery, is that you're just automatically presuming that life there, going down the road towards being a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, is better than that life there. And it isn't necessarily, and that's really changing, Nick. That's really changing. You're much better off to have the skills you've got than you are to have a PhD in English literature.
Kids nowadays know that they can achieve if they want to, irrespective of the route. Some of them want to put pen to paper. Some of them want to put a spanner.
Do you believe that?
Yeah.
Why is there a million kids out of education, employment and training? I don't think they believe that at all anymore.
They might believe it, but getting off their bottoms and doing something about it is a very different thing.
No, I disagree, actually. I think you, if you believe it, you'll get off your bottom and try to do it. The reason why you never get off your bottom and try to do it is because you just don't believe there's any point, or that it's possible, or that it can be done. And listen, I'm not criticising you by any stretch of the imagination. That would be pot kettle gone mad. But I do wonder that the very personal... the more unique... You can't have gradations of uniqueness, but the more specific an experience is, this is what I mean by the Michael Goves, then the less helpful it is to try to frame national policy. So, it's a bit like what I call the Alan Sugar paradigm. When people say, well, Alan Sugar, he started off with a market stall and became one of the most successful people in the country. So, you don't need this or you don't need that. But he was truly exceptional. You don't frame an entire system, or you don't justify an entire system because one exception proved the rule. You do the opposite. You say, well, they're exceptionals, they're outliers. If you were plotting a graph, you'd take them off the graph when you were working out what to do with the mean or the mean or the mode or the median. I can never remember which is which. Anyway, at least, judging by the quality of the first caller, at least my point is making sense. 10:30 is the time. Dominic Ellis has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
9:33 is the time. Mervyn writes, James, you're not wrong. Andy Burnham's new drive towards vocational education is good, but unfortunately it means that working class children will now be forced towards, or let's say pushed, Mervyn, pushed towards the vocational educational route again, leaving the more privileged wealthy children an even clearer path to the reducing number of academic-based jobs. Why can you all put this stuff in 4 sentences when it takes me 20 minutes to get my thoughts out there? Simon makes an excellent point. Tell the headmaster at Eton to stand in front of his boiler reading Shakespeare to it when it breaks down. Any snobbery about British gas engineers would evaporate in an instant, except it wouldn't. He would fully understand the necessity of paying someone to fix his boiler, but he would not be charging parents £60,000 a year to imbue their children with an ambition to be a pipe fitter. I'm sorry, but that's just true. And Malk in Lutterworth says, you're correct. Public-private schools teaching gas fitting isn't going to happen, but they constitute 7% of the education system. That's just the way it is. So kids in 93% or 93% of kids will get a better chance in life following Andy Burnham's proposal. And the combination of those 3 texts, which are all brilliant, by the way. I'll just add one more as well. If you teach teenagers practical topics, says Ben, they'll be able to take that square peg, stick it on a lathe and turn it into a round one. There you go. That's the person who gets the job, isn't it? But that's it. That's my issue. In that Tony Blair was saying to people who historically hadn't come from backgrounds that were middle class, you too deserve these opportunities. And Andy Burnham is arguably saying, not that you don't deserve these opportunities, but that they're not going to be as available to you as they are to others. And that's a massive problem for me because of my go-vitus. Because I'm looking at this story through the lens of my own life and experiences, which is why I want to know what it looks like through yours. Tracy is in Ulverston. Tracy, what would you like to say?
Hi, I'm 57 now, and I wanted to be a hairdresser from as early as I can remember.
Oh, yes.
So none of my dolls and teddies had any hair, and then I progressed to my brother's hair, got my first professional pair of scissors for my 14th birthday.
Where did it come from?
To this day.
Where did it come from? The
I
ambition?
have no idea.
Really?
It was just there. I'm a milliner as well now, so I diverted into that, which is fantastic. Love them both still to this day. But my oldest brother is professor of maths and philosophy, works for the Meteorological Institute. My next brother used to work for Fujitsu. He's travelled the world with his job. My oldest brother is a true academic, and he was just very, very driven from the start and just loved learning and still does, and he's still working. My next brother, he chased ambition, and, we're all very happy. We're allowed to do what we wanted to do. And I passed all my exams at school. But
Did you enjoy school?
I enjoyed sports and music.
Okay. But you passed all...
Yeah.
So... I mean, are you telling me that you should have been able to hop on the hairdresser route at the age of 14 and that you do think that you shouldn't have had to waste your time doing all those other subjects?
No. It was definitely what I was going to be.
But again, I'm going to do this with every caller, aren't I? It's one of those days. So I spend 10 minutes, Tracy, saying, this is awful. I can only see the story through the lens of my own experiences. Tell me what yours are. Then you ring in and the last fella ring in and tell me the story through the lens of your own experience. Like, but we can't use that, though, because it's too specific. Because I'm about to say to you, most 14-year-olds haven't got a Scooby-Doo what they want to do with the rest of their lives, even if they think that they have.
Yeah, well, that was my second brother. The first one, he knew that he was going to go to Oxford. He just loved to learn. He didn't really know that he was going to end up being a nuclear physicist working for the Meteorological Institute. But, until that came along, then, and our mum was really good. She allowed us to do whatever, as long as we had a backup plan in case that first idea never worked out.
What was your backup?
I've got lots of typing qualifications. So I could go and work in BAE Systems, which was Vickers at the time. So I could have go get an office job.
So you don't have any of my misgivings about this. You think that at the age of 14, whatever it's not whatever your background, though. That's my problem, is that the kids at private school are not going to be able to opt to be hairdressers. But you would say, well, poor them.
Well, the private schools in our town where I grew up, they never used to send their children to us for work experience. No. All the other schools did. And I know that there was girls at that school that wanted to be hairdressers, but they weren't allowed to get that experience, which is ridiculous. We could get every other experience we wanted to in offices and things.
You're so right. You're obviously right. Be honest with me. Don't hold back. I sense you probably wouldn't anyway, but I'm just stressing that you... Do I sound a bit of a snob to you today? An accidental snob? I do.
A definite snob, not accidental.
Oh, all right. Hang on a minute. Oh, no, I said don't hold back, didn't I? Why? Because I'm thinking of the kids at that other school. But I'm already judging your profession, aren't I? I'm saying, you wouldn't necessarily want to end up like Tracy unless you had to. And that's
I love
snobbish.
my job, and I love to go to work. Listen, I get excited about it every day.
I know.
Still.
It is. Andy Burnham is recognising a reality that I am struggling to see.
Yeah, you see, I think I would be absolutely bored, ridiculous I can do it. I went and did sat the exam for the Institute of Trichologists down in London because I found that that area of hairdressing really interesting.
Yes.
And you needed to have A-levels to join the Institute of Trichology, which I didn't have, so I had to go and sit the entrance exam, which I still passed that as well to be able to start studying that too. But so I could do it if I wanted to, but just...
And our education system is still Victorian. It's still saying to 13 and 14-year-olds, well, yeah, I mean, I suppose you might end up doing that, but let's not settle for it. The language is awful here, isn't it? Why shouldn't you be saying to someone who's got a passion and an enthusiasm for something that involves talent and effort and training, that, yeah, okay, we're gonna help you get into that world now. At what age? I mean, you left school at 16, presumably, did you?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
And then you could go and train
straight to college,
right? Yeah. To study hairdressing.
Yeah, and I did my City and Guilds and my Advanced City and Guilds in 2 years instead of 4, and then immediately got a management job, and I've just been really good at everything I've done ever since. And the millinery is brilliant, I love that.
And that's creative as well, isn't it? That's an artistic
anything
as well.
From the neck up.
I think your call is the one I'm going to remember most today. It's only 22:11. There might be another, but it is this weird I don't even know what it is. It's a class-based idea that some jobs are, quotes, better than others, and that's just bonkers. And it's getting more bonkers. It's more bonkers than it was when we were young. To think that now, with the way that the world is changing and some jobs are becoming redundant and moribund and irrelevant, and yet people are always going to need to get their hair cut, and good hairdressers are always going to be valued and valuable, aren't they?
And good milliners. You can make somebody cry with emotion, just absolutely delighted that you've made their most important day of their life, the daughter's son's wedding. Yeah. And you've just made their outfit absolutely perfect for them. Do
you cut your brother's hair? Or does he live too far away?
He lives in Sweden.
Yeah, well...
But his wife, she's a professor of chemistry, and I just did her hair and highlights last week when they came to visit. So, there you go. Still do it now.
There you go, indeed. I will try to be less snobby about this. And yet, I can't shake that simple observation that Andy Burnham might think that this would suit his own children, but I'll tell you for a fact that Boris Johnson wouldn't. I don't know why that matters to me. Maybe it shouldn't. And talking to people like Tracy really does sow the seeds of the idea that I need to get over it. It really shouldn't matter. And how many people went to schools like mine who would have actually been much happier doing the kind of jobs that we were told, for very snobbish reasons, were not for the likes of us? I've never thought of it that way round. Oh, no, you can't do that. I just want to be I'd like to be a shepherd, or I'd like to be a carpenter, or I'd like to be... I suppose Princess Margaret's son was a carpenter. Thank you, Tracy. That was absolutely brilliant. Mike's in Woodbridge. Mike, what do you reckon?
Hello, James.
Hello,
I did enjoy that last conversation as well. It was an absolute hoot.
It was also very illuminating.
It was indeed. It was. Let's hope I can come somewhere close to it anyway. I sort of agree and disagree with you, and it's interesting that this debate between the academic and the practical type of thing. What do we actually get kids to do first in education? We get them to be builders. Because we put them in nursery school and we give them construction kits, we give them building blocks, we give them all of those things. And then we move them into main school, and then we teach them to be academics. I'm using the terms very loosely, of course. What the system lacks, in my view, as an experienced educational professional, is the flexibility to actually allow them to move from one to another. We used to have, well, in my day, maybe yours as well, we used to have discrete lessons of woodwork and domestic science and all the rest of it. Schools got hit by 2 or 3 perfect storms. They got hit by the national curriculum, which brought in design and technology and brought all those subjects together, the domestic science, the woodwork, and then they brought in metalwork, resistant material work, textiles, all the rest of it. I doubt they gave them anything like the same accumulated time.
Yeah.
As a result, you don't get the experience that I got at a grammar school doing woodwork, and I still use the mahogany tea trolley I made then. So, but it goes further than that, because what you end up with is students, a proportion of whom are very disillusioned. They are not happy with the academic side. They might go back to it. They might well go back to it, but they have to be given the opportunity to experience other things.
It's fair at 14 to have a clearish idea, because I often think about the 11 plus and that consigning children to a second class education when unfairly, but 14 is a reasonable age. Year 10 is a reasonable age at which to say, well, maybe you need a slightly more diverse educational palette than is currently available.
Yeah, I think you're right. And don't forget, the 11 plus was followed by the 13 plus, which is an acknowledgement that the 11 plus wasn't getting it right.
I do forget that. I often forget that, yes.
But let me give an example. Here in Woodbridge, we've got a wonderful community workshop resource. It's currently being used for a very big project, but before that got going, I worked with some other people to set up a series of pilot studies, working with the local high school, working with a local charity, and working with the social services to try and address the needs and the problems of the NEET. And it was incredibly successful, not just in getting them back into school, but in terms of their confidence level improvement, their mental health improvement. One young woman who hadn't been to school for nearly 3 years came and watched one day with her social worker. She saw the practical things the kids were doing. Next week she joined in, never missed another session, got her confidence back. She's at university now. And for all I know, she could be studying Greek or something highly philosophical. But it was about opportunities and chances.
So I talk a lot about doors, and actually what Andy Burnham is suggesting is that we need more doors.
We need more doors, but unfortunately, if you want a door, you've got to put good quality hinges on it, good quality door furniture.
Yes, and a nice old knocker.
And there's one other aspect that we forget, and that is society.
Yes.
We are no longer a nuclear society. We are no longer the society where if a young 14-year-old wants to do something practical, Grandad lives round the corner and he can actually go round and work in his tool shed.
And we need to put something in place.
That's exactly what we need to do.
God.
And if you want to find out, and I recommend all your viewers go and look at a website for Rocking the Boat. Not the pop group, but www.rockingtheboat.
Hang on, you can't just do this. What is it? You can't just do this. It might be filthy. What is it?
I came across it when I worked in America. Okay. It's set up in the Bronx to address the needs of kids who are at danger of dropout of high school.
Okay, well, that's very pertinent to a lot of the
15 years of success to the point that the governor of California has asked them to go and set one up in Los Angeles.
So just
in San Francisco.
Because you're good at this, clearly. and also because the last caller put me in my place very effectively, or at least, it gave my head a wobble. Hang on, just remind me why it doesn't matter that kids at the most privileged schools will not be offered these doors. Remind me why that's not a reason to object to the scheme in general, because the 7% of privately educated children are destined not for better things but for different things.
I'm not sure it doesn't matter, because I think I've got grandchildren in the private system, and they get a range of other experiences, largely sporting rather than practical.
Okay,
but they certainly do get art, and they certainly do get drama. And
these things give you swagger, as I think Nicholas Soames once called it, or they give you a degree of confidence that is probably lacking in most of the young people who are currently not in education or employment or training. So maybe you're not just paying for academic achievement. Well, you're not, are you? You're paying for lots of different things as well. And there it is. There's my gristle. I told you I had a mental blockage, and I told you I didn't like it, and I didn't think it was fair. But it is now being chipped away at by, well, the best callers in the history of radio phone-in shows, which I'm blessed with listening to every day. And Mike, absolutely up there with the best of them. It's 10:48.
James O'Brien on LBC.
51 is the time. James, are you going to mention Farage getting triggered by a T-shirt in light of some of the comments he has made previously? Are we looking at two-tier snowflakery? Asks Mike. I don't think we are. Well, I mean, yeah, we probably are. But I was racking my brains earlier. If you're not across this story, Zach Polanski has apologised for and deleted a photograph he put on Instagram that shows a man wearing a T-shirt that has the phrase, "We're only making plans for Nigel," alongside a photograph of a guillotine. I mean, Nigel Farage has reported Zach Polanski for inciting murder. Which, of course, people who've been arguing furiously in recent years that free speech means you should be able to say exactly what you want and whatever you want on social media will probably struggle with the violence of that reverse ferret. But Polanski immediately apologised as soon as it was pointed out to him what he'd done, alongside 20 images. One of them contained this picture. He deleted it and apologised, and a spokesperson said that he had done so without realising that there was more to it than he had seen, which seems reasonable to me. And I was trying to think of another politician who'd said something about taking a knife to the civil service a few years ago. And I thought I'd imagined that, because Nigel Farage talked about picking up a rifle if Brexit wasn't done. Nobody actually thought he was going to go out and shoot anybody, did they, when he said that? But I still don't think he should have said it. Nobody seriously thinks that this bloke in the T-shirt is inciting the murder of Nigel Farage, but he still shouldn't have worn it. It's an unnecessary extremity. It's perfectly capable or perfectly possible to critique politicians in the roundest way without ever bringing possible death into the conversation or violence, physical violence into the conversation. So I was desperately trying to remember who it was who had said that that he would take a knife to civil servants. And I should have remembered, actually, that it was indeed Nigel Farage. Nobody actually thought that he was inciting the stabbing of civil servants when he said he was going to take a knife to civil servants. And he acknowledged it himself later when he said, "I should have said take the axe," which is a more traditional term for cuts. So this weird two-tier offence seems to be really kicking in at the moment, doesn't it? There's no way that Zach Polanski was encouraging anybody to kill Nigel Farage any more than Nigel Farage was encouraging anybody to stab civil servants. But they both, one accidentally and one very deliberately, one posted a photograph, one actually gave a speech in which they used violent imagery in relation to other human beings, whether a politician or a civil servant. So both bad. Nigel Farage was investigated by police, who elected to take no action, and I suspect that the same conclusion will be the one with Zach Polanski. But it's a bit odd for somebody who has been on the receiving end of this kind of inquiry and argued that they'd done nothing wrong to now be arguing that a picture of a guillotine would somehow incite murder. But they are complaining about the strangest things at the moment, that lot, despite having campaigned for years on a quotes free speech end quotes platform. So just bringing you up to speed with that story, and that's not the time that Nigel Farage said he was going to pick up a rifle if Brexit was frustrated, or the time he said that Brexit had achieved without a single shot being fired, which must have been very uncomfortable listening for Joe Cox's family. This is the time that he said he was going to take a knife to the civil service. But Zach Polanski accidentally, by his own account, posting a photograph of a man in a T-shirt with a guillotine on it, saying, "We're only making plans for Nigel," that apparently could be incitement to murder. What a strange period of history we are living through together at the moment. It's 10:55 and Debs is in Leeds. Debs, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I'm really conflicted by this.
So am I, mate. At least no one's called you a snob.
Well, I don't know. You might do by the end. But,
Go on.
I was the first person in my entire extended family to go to university, and I just knew I really wanted to go. And I went and I read history. But when I left university, I actually went to work as an electrician in a theatre. And I was a theatre electrician doing lighting and sound for 17 years. Absolutely loved it. Went into stage management and just had the best career and absolutely don't regret it for a minute. My dad was really cross because he was just like, well, you could have done that on a YTS scheme.
Could you?
Can probably tell how old I am.
Could you have done it? Could you have done it on a YTS screen?
Yeah, I could.
Right,
we had when I was working there, we had a YTS lad working there, and it was quite funny. Actually, that's a completely different story because I was the first female to work in it was in the Sherman Theatre in Cardiff, and I was the first female technician they'd employed. And quite often people used to go and talk to the YTS boy, but that's a different topic. Anyway, at the age of 38, after having a family, I sort of decided I need to get a grown-up job. So I went and did a PGCE and went into teaching, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I hadn't have had a degree. And then I was a teacher, been a teacher for over 20 years, became a head teacher for 7 years, and now support other head teachers. And I sort of, that's why I'm conflicted about it, because I think that I understand what Tony Blair was trying to do, and I think he had the best intentions.
Yes.
And at the time, I suppose, there were more doors open. I love that phrase when he said we need more doors. There were more doors open, but I think we were channeled at the age of 14, and that's what worries me. We were channeled into the academic kids and the practical kids and the sort of techie kids, you know, and the boys who were good at maths who went into computing, who are now earning a fortune in IT.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want it to go back to that, where you weren't given all the opportunities. So yeah, I'm really conflicted about it. I think that the best thing that Andy Burnham could do is actually go right back and look at the primary education curriculum and then the secondary education curriculum, because Michael Gove changed it in 2010 to turn it into his sort of wet dream of a grammar school education for everybody. And
well, there's no perfect solution to this, and at the moment there are kids who would benefit from having other avenues open to them for whom those avenues are not open, and your conflict is more interesting than mine. Mine is rooted in a sort of snobbery, in things that I was programmed to believe from a very, very early age. Yours is not. Yours is more subtle and more interesting than mine. But is it assuaged in any way by the thought that A, this would be something that young people chose to do themselves, and B, it's not a zero-sum game. They would be studying these things alongside what they're currently studying. So, albeit that you're opening up some avenues, you're not necessarily locking other avenues shut in the process.
I think so, except one of the issues with our curriculum at the moment in both primary and secondary is that everything just keeps getting added to it. So even this morning with water safety and things, it was like somebody phoned up and said schools should be doing more swimming. You know, anything that happens in society, it's like schools should be teaching this. And there's only so many hours in the day. And at the moment, it's kind of very knowledge-based, academic, and the children are tested on that. So there's no... I was talking to a head teacher yesterday, and they were talking about how some of the children in their school who are fantastic artists or, you know, who are really skilled in practical skills just get written off at the age of 10 and 11.
And that would be improved by this proposal?
Back in primary, because he's talking about sort of
I see what you mean. So they're already out of the loop by the time they get to secondary school. And, well, I mean, I think you're letting the perfect be the enemy of the good a bit there, because, you know, they may extend it retrospectively. They may recognise it a little bit earlier. I don't know whether a 10 or 11-year-old should be consigned to anything at such an early age. I've got this weird idea that you could take a 10-year-old from a really tough background, stick him in an incredible educational environment, and it would turn out they were really, really interested in lots of things that they just weren't aware of previously. 1 minute after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Let's do some quotes on that two-tier offence story we touched on a moment ago. So Farage has said, if I was to post anything as insightful, then I would expect to be arrested, and so should Polanski. Polanski, as soon as this picture was brought to his attention, immediately took it down, and a spokesman has said he condemns the image on the T-shirt. He was tagged in a post with 20 images and clicked accept without realising there was more to it than he had seen. I don't know whether technically he's apologised, but he's condemned the image on the T-shirt, and the spokesman went on to say it's clearly in poor taste, especially at the time of heightened fears for the security of public figures. Having experienced multiple threats himself, why can't they all agree not to use words like knife or rifle? And I don't think Zach Polanski would argue with that. Don't post pictures of guillotines. Don't say that you're going to knife civil servants. Don't say that you're going to pick up a rifle if Brexit doesn't work. Check your Instagram for photographs that are potentially violent, and don't post them accordingly. So the idea that you could use this to sort of claim that one side is better or worse than the other is obviously silly, whereas what you should really be doing is calling upon all politicians, especially given recent events, to stop using language or imagery of violence. If they've done it accidentally, then make immediate amends. If they've done it on purpose, then look to your own record. The police, to give you the third quote, we received a third-party report relating to an image shared on social media. We take reports of this nature seriously, and officers are conducting inquiries into the matter, just as they did when Nigel Farage said that he was going to take a knife to the civil service. I suppose now we just have to wait for Elon Musk to claim that this is proof that you can't say what you want in this country without getting arrested. It's 11:03.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Listen, I'm pretty good at this. I do apologise for not being more across it. But, of course, if you post a picture by Zach Polanski's account by accident on Instagram, then you are inciting murder and should be arrested. If you are actually convicted in a British court of inciting racial hatred on social media, meanwhile, this is what Nigel Farage thinks should happen.
Our Planet Normal guest this week has become a living symbol of two-tier Britain. The sheer injustice she has suffered has shocked millions of people across Britain and indeed across the whole world. She's a wonderful mum, wife, beloved childminder, little kids from every corner of the earth she's taken wonderful care of. So I am, of course, referring to Britain's favourite political prisoner. Ladies and gentlemen, please give the warmest of welcomes to Lucy Connolly.
So, I mean, just to recap on what a mad period of history this is, if you are guilty of inciting racial hatred, or indeed violence, by tweeting mass deportation now, set fire to all the effing hotels full of the B words for all I care, while you're at it, take the treacherous government and politicians with them, you're a heroine, you're a folk hero, you're a political prisoner. If you, by Zach Polanski's account, accidentally post a picture of a man in a T-shirt with an XTC lyric on it about making plans for Nigel and a picture of a guillotine, then you are inciting murder and should be arrested. For the avoidance of doubt, politicians should never use imagery or language that is violent, in my humble opinion. And for the avoidance of doubt, no politician should ever countenance treating a convicted criminal or a criminal convicted of incitement to racial hatred like a folk hero, let alone an entire party conference for a political party. But there are some things that everybody has to agree on. And this should be one of them. Unfortunately, if you've got somebody who routinely talks about picking up rifles or knifing civil servants, claiming that a T-shirt is profoundly offensive and Lucy Connolly is some sort of folk hero, you've got hypocrisy on a scale that is almost impossible to process. But there it is. So you get a hero's welcome, like a sort of X Factor winner, on stage at a party conference if you're convicted of inciting racial hatred. But if you post a picture of a man in a T-shirt with a guillotine on it and a reference to an XTC lyric containing the word Nigel, then you should be arrested and you're inciting murder. You don't have to pick a side on this. You just have to treat all events, all moments equally. And if you do, you'll be as confused as I am about recent events. I'm staying with this conversation because the calls were brilliant. The insights, if you like, into the... Let's listen to that Andy Burnham clip again, because this pushes it on, I think, the conversation. And he's getting a lot right at the moment, isn't he? The polling reflects that, actually. Speaking of Reform UK, they've been overtaken by Labour for the first time in ages. Kemi Badenoch's brilliant performance as Tory leader continues to see her remain behind where the Tories were when they lost a general election to Keir Starmer. But don't let that, certainly not putting her off her stride, so don't let it put you off either. Here's Andy Burnham speaking earlier today.
I hear wherever I go that young people are often looking for something different from education. We've had a system built for too long around the university route, and it sends a message to some young people that they're some kind of second-class citizens, and it's just not right. They need an education system that works for them as well, that offers a path to all young people, that's balanced between academic and technical.
Is that you? 0345 606 0973, because this is, I think, I mean, you could set it up as a response to the changing nature of our society, but it's also a riposte to Tony Blair era politics. In 1997, everybody should be trying to go to university, or more people than ever before should be trying to go to university. Andy Burnham now recognising the existence of people that can't or don't want to, and saying that partly, I think, as a consequence, I think this is implicit of what he says, partly as a consequence of Tony Blair's rhetoric and policies, those young people ended up feeling like second-class citizens. And I think he's probably right. But I want to talk to you if you were one of them, or if you are one. Did you feel like a second-class citizen by dint of not wanting to go to university or not being able to go to university? God, man. Has the pendulum swung too far? 0345 606 0973 is the number you need. Tom's in Newquay. Tom, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think you might have just teed me up quite nicely there, actually.
Well, it's the first time for everything. It's a complete accident if I have, Tom, but fill your boots.
Yeah, so I'm 35 and I left school in 2007. I think I was the last year at school that you could leave at 16 without any sort of further plans like college or A-levels or anything like that. And as a sort of extra bit of nuance to this, I spent the last 2 years at private school as well, which was, interesting.
So what, you just didn't gel with the academics then, even?
I was never an academic person. I sort of had a bit of dyslexia. I wouldn't say I suffered with it badly compared to people I know.
Okay.
But, I always had to do sort of the extra literacy hour and numeracy hour and that at primary school, and, never really got it. Hated it, really, to be honest. And my parents tried to put me into private education to sort of like get the best out of it, but I'd already lost interest in school. All I wanted to be was a carpenter,
right,
or a cabinet maker, but because of the recession, when I actually left school, that was really difficult to find apprenticeships. It was nearly impossible. So went off and did a couple of other things until I was 20. And then I've got a small building company now, and I employ a few guys. And my sort of point was that I meet a lot of people that were similar to myself. And,
yes,
they spent years at school just failing, basically. Like never achieving what was expected of them, never being good at it, never feeling any sort of like satisfaction from it.
It just didn't fit.
Just didn't fit. And
did your parents send you to the private school because they thought that it could fit with a different approach?
They sent me because my sister was struggling at the local state school, and they thought that'd be a better fit for her. And then I think they just wanted to make sure it was fair, even though I was sort of enjoying the state school, but probably not thriving. They just wanted to make sure it was fair.
Yeah.
And
they sound lovely. They sound lovely,
yeah,
but it didn't make the blindest bit of difference to your relationship with education.
No, absolutely not. And I wasn't interested, but I wasn't interested because I was never what's the word I want? I was never successful. I couldn't do it.
Do you know, the thing is, correct me if I'm wrong, right? But if we were talking about sport, no one would think that this was in any way controversial or complicated. You'd just be like, listen, I was always picked last. I was just rubbish at it, and therefore there's no earthly way I was ever going to go into a career that involved playing sport, and that's how you sound when you're talking about the academics. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I think people are, living in a world of equal opportunities for everyone, which I agree with. I think sometimes we're scared to admit that some people are just not as academic as other people.
Yeah.
And if they were nurtured from a younger age into something that actually gave them some satisfaction, gave them a sense of achievement, I think it would go a lot further. And I think, this sort of brings me into my thoughts further from this, where we look at other issues within society. So, if young guys, I'm going to talk about guys because I'm a guy, if they were nurtured from a younger age and given some satisfaction, given some sense of achievement, that might change things, I think, significantly.
Are you thinking of the manosphere and stuff?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking of.
Oh, man, that's clever. Of course, that's part of the sense of feeling unrecognised, unseen, unappreciated, isn't it? And that's where the bad people move in and start exploiting you.
Something I think, often tradesmen and mechanics and stuff, they always get a bad rap for maybe being grumpy or maybe being a bit protective of what they're doing or protective of their knowledge. But I think it's because they hold it incredibly dearly, because it's something special to them, because it makes them feel good, makes them feel successful, makes them feel like they're achieving something after years and years and years of never.
This is a no-brainer for you. Let me run something by you that's just occurred while I was listening to you. By definition, if you're a politician, even a Labour politician, then, there will be some glorious exceptions to this, like Angela Rayner, but almost by definition, you would have excelled at school. Andy Burnham talks about the moment his teacher told him that he should be applying for Cambridge University, and he balked at the idea. He thought, don't be ridiculous. That's not for the likes of me. But, his dad, who was a BT phone engineer, and his mum, who was a GP's receptionist, they wanted it for him and celebrated it. Some parents might not have done. But by definition, if you're a politician, you will think, even a left-wing politician, perhaps especially a left-wing politician, you will think that traditional academic education is the passport to advancement and social mobility. And they lose touch with all the people they were at school with, like you, who prove the opposite.
Yeah, absolutely. And, people like me were actively discouraged at school. I remember going to career, especially at the private school, like careers days or whatever, and you say, this is what I want to do. And it was almost like people just turn their back on you, because I'd say more so at the private school, because that wasn't what they wanted their students to be doing when they left. That was not the image, that was not the legacy of the school. And that's something, that's kind of a separate subject. But
no, but this is it, isn't it? So you understand exactly what Andy Burnham is saying and why.
Yeah, totally, 100%. And I see it on the day-to-day with, all of the people that I work with on the day-to-day. It's not, I don't think I'm unique.
No, and I think that Andy Burnham, or more recently, not Andy Burnham actually, he's managed to sort of reconnect with where he came from, which is a large part of his political project. But because these conversations, I'll tell you what I remember, Tom. I was in a TV studio with Joe Johnson, Boris Johnson's little brother, who was a very good education minister. Everybody rated him in education. But he was talking about something replacing university degrees for something equivalent, but not as academic. It would be more vocational. And I said to him, you wouldn't want your own children to go down this path, would you? And he sort of, kind of, the look on his face meant, well, no, of course I jolly well wouldn't. And I thought that was a big zinger and a big gotcha. But in that encounter, actually, I was probably the one that was at fault, because maybe that's not what he wants for his children, but that doesn't mean he can't legislate for other people's children.
I think we need to drop the stigma
you're right.
on jobs that outside of, well, I've had people say to me in the past, like, oh yeah, my children are all in professions.
Yeah.
You know, me, and I was like, well, what? I'm sorry, but what exactly do you mean by that? or like, you know,
Yes.
we've been doing jobs for clients and we're outside using Pythagoras theorem to set out an extension. And the client goes, oh, you actually have to be quite smart to be a builder. And I just like, you know, those stigmas just run so deep. And they're started at a very early age. You know, oh, if you don't do your homework, you'll end up on a building site. Or, you know, like that.
You're not wrong.
It's just, I just think that's sort of a grassroots thing that needs to change and realise that these are actually really good jobs. And, you know,
and they're more,
jobs.
You're safer from AI and other changes, aren't you, than an awful lot of the people who are in the, quotes, professions, end quotes. Do we know where it comes from historically? I mean, was it post-industrial revolution in that, you know, you were either a factory worker or a manager? I don't know where I don't even know what other countries are like. Is there a similar snobbery in the United States, do you think?
Well, I've worked in Australia and New Zealand, and trades out there are, you know, revered. Like, it's great to be a tradie out there. It's a, you know, you're not revered. That's probably a bit much, but
no.
You know, like,
all hail the mighty builders.
At least.
Well, you're right. There is some, and I wonder why it is. In fact, it's only 11:20. We stayed with this until about 11:45. So, why is it? Where does this? I'm going to call it snobbery because, you know, that is what I have, I think, historically been guilty of. I'm still not 100% comfortable. If I was Tom and I was running a small building firm, or that's what I did before I came into this job, and I'd somehow ended up doing a radio show, having a background in construction, I would not feel uncomfortable saying what he said. But there's something about, I guess class is a straitjacket, isn't it? Whoever you are. Very, very hard to take it off. So I am uncomfortable saying your children would benefit from this. But actually, I've got one child at university. It may well be that there's stuff here that the other one would benefit from. It's just quite hard, I think, to wean yourself off the middle class conveyor belt. GCSEs, A-levels, university degree. It's a conveyor belt. We've all been on it, and therefore our children will go on it as well. But the conveyor belt does not lead to the places that it used to lead to. And what you're doing, and what Tom and other callers have brilliantly highlighted today, is how many other conveyor belts there are. What explains British antipathy towards trades, as opposed to, for example, the Australian respect for them? 0345 606 0973. It's 11:22.
This is LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
23 minutes after 11, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Very important correction from something that somehow slipped through the net earlier in the programme. Nikki has been in touch from Kent to say, your caller is wrong. There is not a pop group called Rocking the Boat. There was a song called Rock the Boat in the 1970s by George McRae. Nikki, thank God you were listening. Imagine if we'd left that uncorrected moving forward. Tom's call was brilliant, wasn't it? And that idea about young men being squeezed out of society a bit and therefore becoming more susceptible to the likes of Andrew Tate and other members of the manosphere is really, really powerful. Nigel Farage, of course, thinks that Andrew Tate is a very important voice for young men. And helps them feel, what was the words that he used? It's important to remember exactly who he is. He thought that perhaps Andrew Tate was giving boys a bit of confidence at school and was an important voice for the emasculated. And this came after, of course, Tate was facing charges in Romania of human trafficking, rape, and forming a criminal gang to sexually exploit women, which he continues to deny. 25 minutes after 11 is the time. Back to Burnham. Where would Bob be today if we were doing it on Tuesdays, which we're not? We're only doing it on Mondays. The Burnham Optimism Barometer. Was it 8 yesterday, Eleanor? 8. That's 8 out of 10 as an average of your marks out of 10 on the optimism scale for Andy Burnham. That's quite incredible, reflected in the polling that's been published today, where Kemi Badenoch continues to defy all the odds with her amazing resurgence and improvement. by still being lower in the polls than the Conservatives were when they got spanked by Keir Starmer in a general election. It's a funny old world. David is in Bath. Not the Bath, I don't think, but the city of Bath. David, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I wanted to phone up to talk about my experiences kind of in sixth form and kind of how my career shaped because of it. So I was originally quite academic, but I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do. And there wasn't always the opportunities in my school to be able to have a more of a hands-on experience. So it was quite a academic school, and we were pushed for university. And originally I was looking at kind of studying something in the sciences, something like biochemistry, which is what my qualification is leading to. But I just didn't get the enjoyment from it that I wanted. And this was going to be the first year that the student fees were going to be about £9,000.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily want to just go to university for the sakes of it. But it was sold in such a way that anything outside of going to university is deemed a failure.
You're talking about the conveyor belt that I described a moment ago, and you were very much on it as a consequence of your background and your family.
Yeah.
Okay, and your class.
I was the first person who would have gone to university out of my family, and I have gone to university since, but I actually took a year out, did my own research, found courses that were never actually available or were ever advertised to myself. So I did a technical apprenticeship at BAE Systems.
Okay.
And that meant that you had a hands-on experience of using kind of lathes and getting some basic engineering knowledge through that way, as well as using CNC, but also the engineering practice.
And did something click inside you that hadn't clicked in the classroom?
Yes, I actually really enjoyed project management rather than engineering and consultancy. And it would never have been an option for me had I gone to university, just because nothing was ever laid out for me to begin with, because it was always pushed to do academic work.
I mean, it's really entrenched in our society, this, isn't it? It is, and I'm a bad example of it, because I benefited from the system that we both were educated in, and I did enjoy the stuff that I was good at, whereas you felt a bit like a square peg in a round hole until you got onto this apprenticeship. I mean, how many people just carried on feeling what you felt?
I mean, so when I joined this apprenticeship, there was only 12 people on it, and they pushed the numbers up, but it was before my year, it was 4 people on this in it. So it was very
because
limited.
we set so much value on a degree.
Yeah. And now they do degree apprenticeships and things as well, and I know they do other things. They expanded it out, but at the time I started it, it was very linear. You either go to university or you go to a college, and it is almost like you're seen as less than when it was at school, and you were scared to be seen as less than. And if I didn't take a year out and reevaluate what I wanted to do, I would probably be stuck in a job that I don't enjoy. I'm working at a consultancy firm now that I absolutely love. I think it's brilliant. It's every morning I wake up and I'm not doing engineering. I've got my degree in engineering because I got off my back and did it myself.
Right.
Because I was enjoying everything.
Sure.
I'm looking at doing a master's now in either an MBA or in engineering management.
Because you're not shutting doors, are you, at that age? You're just going through different ones, and there's nothing to stop you circling back and doing things differently when you know more about where you want to be.
Was talking to your producer, sorry for cutting you off there.
That's when I was talking to your producer as
well, I gave an interesting anecdote as well, because I feel like you might ask, okay, but what about people who go to kind of schools like yourself, who went to kind of a private school? I went to comprehensive. My wife went to a private school. One of our friends who owns and runs a barber shop went to a private school, not very academically gifted. And I don't think you'll mind me saying that, because he's extremely successful, probably earns more money than I ever will now by doing what he did. But because his school recognised that he wasn't academically gifted, they helped shape him and give him courses into kind of business management, and also setting out with barbershops and things, so that he could actually find what he enjoyed and express doing it. And he was like, he wouldn't be able to do that, and he wouldn't be in the position he was if he not gone to private school as well. So there is some cases, I understand it's probably not going to be like Eton or Harrow, but there are definitely cases out there that was the case for certain people as well.
And that, I don't know, I guess it's partly a consequence of my conveyor belt, that I spend far too much time thinking about the schools you mentioned, and indeed my own school, than I do about the massive majority of the population. And it's all class, isn't it? I mean, there was a reason historically for keeping people in their place, for keeping people in their pigeonholes, and the middle class would furiously protect its privilege and its patronage. You know, the last thing you wanted was the great unwashed muscling in upon your monopoly on white-collar jobs. But you're absolutely right that those distinctions are just dead in the water now. Those distinctions don't really exist. And your man who wanted to be a barber reminds us of, was it Helen in Elverton? I've misremembered her name, I think. Was it Helen? The lady in Elverton who had always wanted to be a hairdresser. And of course, had she had slightly more snobbish parents, they'd have been saying, you can't be a hairdresser, your brother's going to be a university professor. Tracy was it in Alverton, forgive me. 31 minutes after 11 is the time. Hang on a minute, I've got another correction to make. Honestly, they're like buses, aren't they? This one's quite serious. Paul Fear has been in touch. You'll know Paul from Smooth Radio, which is just about 30 yards away from where I'm currently sitting. And Paul's been in touch to say, James, Hughes Corporation did rock the boat. George McRae did rock your baby. So, Nikki and Ken, your correction has now been corrected. Here's Dominic Ellis with the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:34 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm undergoing a bit of a transformation, aren't I? I'm having a genuine recalibration here. And it will be a work in progress. It really isn't going to be over overnight, but it's linked to that line, which I think will probably be a chapter heading when historians of the future come to chronicle Andy Burnham's premiership. Hopefully it's a book. Of course, there's always a chance that, like Liz Truss, it would be a pamphlet. But that we need to value hard hats as much as graduation caps. And that somehow, despite my long and glorious history as a builder, which you may be aware of if you've listened to this programme before, 2 weeks in a building site in Doncaster in 1988. I've never been so tired in my life, even when I'd go for 48 hours straight clubbing. Back in the day, I was never as physically exhausted as I was when I did a proper job for 10 days in the back end of the 1980s. But that line about hard hats and graduation caps sounds like a Stereophonics lyric, doesn't it? But that line about hard hats and graduation caps is speaking directly to my prejudices. I think I've still got that very hard to shake idea that it's legislation designed for other people's children. But it's not coming from a Tory. It's coming from a Labour Prime Minister. If it was a Tory, and this is an example perhaps of my footballification, or just perhaps the fact that many Tory policies pledging to help poorer people are not entirely in good faith. If it was a Tory saying, we need to value hard hats, you would be right to point out that they're not talking about their own children. Labour politicians possibly, probably are. I don't know, but it's undergoing, it's changing. And he's right. We need to treat these jobs and these career paths and these futures with more respect and warmth than we currently do. And as many of you are pointing out, the quality of the calls today, it has been extraordinary. But that's the new normal, isn't it? To be honest, you probably should start texting me when the calls are a bit rubbish. We'll take it as a given that the calls are brilliant. Give me a text next week and say, oh dear, James, I don't know what's happened today, but things have really gone off a bit of a cliff, haven't they? So the pressure's now on Graham in Ramsgate. I'm in Ramsgate at the weekend, Graham. Where shall I go?
Not on the beach.
Okay, thanks for that. Carry on. What made you pick up the phone today?
Andy Burnham. Right, I am delighted and frustrated in equal measure.
Okay.
Why are they only looking at secondary school?
Oh, give him a chance.
Give
him a chance, Gray.
Well, okay.
Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. He's looking at 14-year-olds, but tell me what you would like to see him also do in primary schools.
All right. Last year, I was asked to set up a pilot scheme. I'm a learning mentor in a mainstream primary school, loosely attached to the Senko team. You can spot these children a mile off in year 2. The children with the behaviours, okay?
Yes.
These are the children that Mr. Goes round peg.
Yeah.
These children are square. You are trying to hammer them into a round hole. They literally cannot do it. They try, a lot of them. And what you see is frustration in them. You see anger. you get all the behaviours, and nobody has spotted the obvious, which is these children are in like a fish out of the water. So our pilot scheme last year, I was asked to set up what's called an alternative provision programme.
Go on.
And that's where you spot those children, take them to one side, give them a programme that says, right, in the morning, you are expected to try your best in the core subjects, English and maths. In the afternoon, you're not going to have to sit in class all day. You're going to come out and we're going to do some interesting stuff, like we're going to do basic electronics, we're going to do woodwork, we're going to build teepees to go out in the play area, we're going to recycle old pallets, turn them into activity centres for reception classes. And by doing that, you give these children an incentive to want to get on. Now, I'll give you an example without naming any names.
Okay.
This is one example of how this works. One child, never in class, always angry, always swearing, turning furniture over, running out the classroom, constantly being pursued by adults to try and get him back in the classroom. This went on. That child joined our programme in the second term of last year. He began to really enjoy doing the stuff like woodwork. And along the way, he realised that actually, to do woodwork, you need to be able to do basic maths. He suddenly started taking an interest in maths in the mornings.
Really?
And to write up the project book, to do the design booklets, you need to be able to write. I don't care about the spelling, but you need to be able to write.
Yes.
Suddenly, he became interested in English. He stopped leaving the classroom. For the last, I think, 3 terms, he hasn't sworn. He hasn't left the classroom. Get this, though, James.
Yeah.
When he joined this programme, he was 3 years behind in maths. By the end of this current year that's just passed, he had caught up and achieved expected in maths. He made up 3 years in 3 terms.
Because he was engaged.
Because he was engaged and he had incentive.
I get it. And I get it. And that, of course, is what you would like to see for every child in a similar situation. Why have they set this up in the school where you work? I mean, who's behind it?
Because I'm not going to name the school. We have a school that has a high percentage of special needs.
Okay.
We're talking ADHD and autistic.
Yes.
It's a mainstream school, but for some reason it's become known locally as the place to send your child if you've got special needs, okay?
Okay, fair enough.
But the obvious downside of that was we had a lot of behaviours going on.
Well, special needs means they have special needs and they're often not met, and you're meeting them, which is a rather beautiful story to hear.
And they can't help those behaviours. You are basically setting them up to fail every day if you do not recognise that they don't fit the round hole.
You just took the words straight out of my mouth. It's alternative provision, isn't it? And it is.
Yes.
I mean, when somebody like you explains it, it's a complete no-brainer. And yet, those rails that we're on educationally, as individuals and as a society, those conveyor belts, they're strong beer, they're hard to break out of, they're hard to get off, but you remind us why it's so important that we do, because some of the kids that are on them are handcuffed. They can't, they're going to violently resist.
Well, so my message to Andy Burnham is, don't start at 14, mate. Start at year 2. Start at age 6.
Yeah, I mean,
are as plain as the nose on your face.
I mean, it's not either or, but you're absolutely right. Many people in schools would be able to say, these are the children that need alternative provision. Let's go with it, really. That's why they're called special needs, because they have special needs and they are not met in a one-size-fits-all curriculum or in a one-size-fits-all education system. I'm not here to defend Andy Burnham, but I think that he is doing something slightly different from what you describe. It's not like doing it younger would be an alternative. because he's coming at it from the end of the conveyor belt, in a sense. He is saying we need to respect these jobs more than we currently do, these paths more than we currently do. And there's no reason why that can't then sort of reverse engineer from 14 to 10 and from 10 to 6 and 7 years old. And these children get identified within the special needs framework and then are better equipped when they reach the age of 14 to have their needs met within the future employment framework as well. But I know that you know that. Thank you, Graham. What a great call. What a great story. What a great job. Thank you. What a great man. Andrew's in Hitchin. Andrew, what would you like to say?
Hi there, James. Well, yeah, my story really is that my father, he went to grammar school. He actually passed his 11 plus. But his father died when he was 14, so he had to go out and earn the family crust. So it was always sort of instilled in us that my granny wanted my two brothers and I to go to university. Yeah. My two older brothers did. I stayed on to the low six, and I wasn't the same person, and I discovered socialising as well, and the school invited me to leave at the end. Yeah. But in my dad's eyes, when I was leaving, he sort of said, "You'll regret it." And of course, at 17, what do you know? Yeah. But for me, it's all, and I mean, he died 3 months before my older daughter was born, actually. But for me, it's always been a thing of that I felt I was good enough in his eyes. And that's, I'm 63 now, and it still gnaws away at me. And there's nothing I can do about it. It's just that sort of, I suppose, attitude he had. I mean, it's like he sort of, when I was sort of taking my options, yes, the school wanted to put me in for CSEs, and his attitude was he'd sooner see me fail at O-level than get a CSE. There was that sort of old-fashioned attitude about, it wasn't as good an exam, and these hang-ups, I think they do. He was very left-leaning and what have you, but it was very much an old-fashioned attitude to education.
That was social mobility. That was the passport to bettering yourself, to use an old-fashioned phrase. Yeah. Was education. I'm really sorry that you've carried that, actually. It's not fair.
Well, and you know what's also not fair is that I've rung up ages many times, and yet my brother, who was visiting from the States and played the Irish pipes, got on straight away a couple of months ago.
Your life is just one long sob story, isn't it, Andrew?
I know it is. Yeah. I'm going to hang up and sob now, James. Thank you very much.
Well, we loved your brother as well, and we love you. That was. I remember that. It was an incredible. Was that Mystery Hour?
Yeah. So what it was, because I just messaged it. I said, Ian, get LBC on now. Yeah,
because he played those pipes that we'd know, the Irish equivalent of the bagpipes, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah,
I remember that. It was incredible. Your dad was wrong. I mean, we honour his memory, but he was wrong. You don't make anybody happier by hammering a square peg through a round hole, and I'm sure that you've lived a life of value and usefulness, Andrew. And I think it's really powerful to hear that even in your 60s you can still be carrying the scars of being labelled a second-class citizen by your own dad, who was only a victim of the system that he lived in, and you and this is exactly what Andy Burnham is talking about. And there goes Bob. There goes the Burnham Optimism Barometer. It was already at 8 yesterday. It could be up to 8.5 by close of play today. And that's when you remember that old adage about despair. I can deal with the despair, Keith. It's the hope that gets me.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10 minutes to 12 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Late entry for Idiot's Corner here from David. Instead of ranting about the right, have I ranted about the right today? How about once you show some balance? Comments, please, on the Polanski post about decapitating Nigel Farage. Is that okay with you? I can only imagine your whole show would be dedicated to it if it had been the other way round. Okay, David, you have to refer me back to the show that we did when Nigel Farage was talking about knifing the civil service and reflect. But hey, look, I am nothing if not your servant, okay? We will spend more time talking about Nigel Farage, just because you are so nicely. And also because I am struggling, Henry Riley, to keep up with all of the investigations into his party's financing at the moment, including some which have emerged very recently.
Yes, and I've done a breakdown to help you out, James. So firstly, we've got the more recent story. Reform are being investigated by the police into payments that were given to the party. This has been revealed by the Guardian newspaper, obviously the story first revealed. So this concerns 2 donations, both worth £250,000. They were made to Reform UK by Britain Means Business just before the 24 election. If you haven't heard of Britain Means Business, it has one director, and that is Richard Tice, who of course is the deputy leader of the party. So that's being looked at, but particularly because Fiona Cottrell, whose son you may have heard of, Posh George, as he's been nicknamed, he's a convicted fraudster. She made a £1 million transfer before this to Britain Means Business, shortly before the donations were made. So there's an accusation that it's an indirect donation, but there are also direct donations, because Fiona Cottrell has herself directly made 2 donations to the party, each worth £250,000 separately. So by my maths, that's £1 million in total. And Britain Means Business and Fiona Cottrell. There have been questions about how Fiona Cottrell has this level of money. I have to say those have not been answered by Fiona Cottrell. She was at one point a stylist, but we do not know much about her profession before that. The Met Police confirming, as reported in The Guardian, that 2 individuals were interviewed. And the Reform UK say that they take pride in the stringent vetting of donations. And Richard Tice said it was the first he'd heard of it was the Met Police briefing the BBC. But Reform UK maintaining that they vet their donations clearly.
So £1 million transferred by a retired stylist to a company owned by Richard Tice, which subsequently donated £500,000 to Reform UK.
And she also, she also donated £500,000 separately.
In her own name.
In her own name.
And her son, George, this is the anti-establishment aristocratic family that I keep reading about. Her son, George, is the convicted fraudster who reportedly calls Nigel Farage daddy.
Spent 8 months in prison in Arizona. Tied to this, James, number 2 is that the Reform UK bank account, it's been revealed by the Sunday Times, was frozen after the Cottrell donations. This is the reporting by the paper that it could not make or receive payments for 2 weeks during the 2024 election. It was frozen after they received donations. The chairman at the time wrote to Arbuthnot Latham, who are the sort of merchant bank. Is it Latham? Sorry, I'm not an account holder. And they were complaining about that, but it also meant Reform UK had received 4 payments totalling £28,000 nearly, and they were impermissible because they come from foreign donors. Reform said again that they take pride in the stringent vetting of donations. And then aside from that, those are the 2 main ones, James, really. Right. So £1 million, Cottrell bank account frozen, or Reform bank account frozen after the Cottrell allegations. The other 2, just quickly, Nigel Farage, the £5 million gift that you may have heard about, that was reported to the National Crime Agency over money laundering concerns. Reform UK again saying Nigel Farage has said he's done nothing wrong. There was the standards probe into Nigel Farage. That, of course, has been paused because he's no longer an MP. And then Nigel Farage also separately, with regards to George Cottrell paying for his security, and it said content creators, Nigel Farage saying he's done nothing wrong there as well, but there's no active investigation into that.
So that's 5.
4, 5.
5 investigations.
5.
Gosh. Stay with us, because I'm just going to have a quick word with Dr. Sam Power, who is a lecturer in politics at the University of Bristol and an expert in political financing and electoral regulation. Sam, thank you for your time. Normal is an odd word to use. Is there a precedent for major political parties having their bank accounts frozen?
So as far as I can tell, no, is the short answer. I was racking my brains when I was asked about this on Sunday when the Times story broke. And the only equivalent example I can think of is the British National Party in 2004 were effectively debanked, to use a phrase, by Barclays after some pretty horrific undercover reporting was outed of some pretty horrific things that they were saying. But that was a bank's decision to effectively absent themselves from being involved with a political party. Never has, as far as I can understand, a bank account been frozen as a result of a National Crime Agency investigation.
Yeah, you may have answered my next question, in which case, is that just to channel the spirit of the late Donald Rumsfeld, in the context of unknown unknowns, we know that they're not. I don't think there's a parallel with the BNP example that you provide. I mean, what other grounds might there be for a political party's bank account to be frozen in this way?
So I suppose what we can go off is the Guardian's initial reporting of the suspicious activity request that was set, which I think we understand led to the freezing of the bank account for that 2-week period. And the quote from the National Crime Agency about suspicious activity requests more generally is that these quite often happen when there is knowledge or suspicion of money laundering. Now, again, it's not necessarily the case that this money was that, but quite often they come in when there is knowledge or suspicion of that. That is not, to be clear, proof of a crime, proof of money laundering, but quite often I think suspicious activity requests do what they say on the tin, really. There is a big amount of money that is being transferred from one place to another, and there's some suspicious activity sort of going on, or potential suspicious activity, so they freeze the source of that money or freeze the provenance just for a minute to check out what's going on.
And for not just the benefit of my listeners, but also for me, how does a National Crime Agency investigation differ from a Metropolitan Police investigation?
Well, it's actually sort of two different investigations that are happening. National Crime Agency is investigating the provenance of the funds and the potential, perhaps, money laundering behind it. What the police are investigating is electoral law, specifically what the provenance of these donations, and very specifically, they're looking at whether the provenance of these donations was hidden in any way, whether the true source of the donor was indeed Britain Means Business and was indeed Fiona Cottrell.
And who is accountable if donations are found to be impermissible? I mean, obviously, the person who gives the money is ultimately responsible for the donation, but how accountable is the recipient of the money if it turns out, and we should stress that Reform, and I quote, takes pride in its stringent vetting of donations and always ensures that the Electoral Commission guidelines on donations as set out in the Political Parties Elections and Referendums Act 2000 are strictly followed, and as has been the case with donations so far. But in the spirit of asking questions, how accountable is the recipient of a donation that is found to have been impermissible?
So the legal requirement almost entirely, the legal onus, I suppose, almost entirely falls on the donor as opposed to the donee in these instances. So, I mean, basically, any political party on receipt of any donation that they have to conduct permissibility requirements on. I mean, as far as I understand it, basically has to eyeball the donation and the donor and say, is this person permissible? Yes, they are. We have conducted our permissibility requirements. The interesting thing in this instance is that's been quite a useful insulator for political parties in the past, because you have these donations, you can say you've done your permissibility requirements, and anything that goes on behind the scenes of that donation is actually, you've done your bit, and that then falls on the donor. What's interesting in the Reform case is that Reform, more than any other political party, have their donor base kind of stitched into the party in and of itself. So they sort of lose that useful sense of insulation from these things. So when we think about Britain Means Business, which is effectively Richard Tice's organisation, who is a Reform MP, you've immediately lost the insulation from donor to donee, as it were. And when the donor becomes the donee, that can become much more tricky for you.
I understand all of that, which is a credit to your clarity, Dr. Sam Power. Thank you. Does the Met want to be involved? Well, in your opinion, does the Met want to be expending time and energy investigating political donations?
To the best of my knowledge, as someone that is not a Metropolitan Police, in the Metropolitan Police, No, is again the short answer. I don't think many people get involved in policing to pursue elections law. Frankly, only particularly nerdy people like me really get involved in that kind of thing, and we probably wouldn't pass the policing tests. And there's also a serious reason, is that police really don't want to be involved in anything particularly political, but they are involved in this, and I think it's the Special Inquiry Team, which is actually a pretty significant body, that are looking into this now. But as a rule of thumb, the Metropolitan Police do say to parliamentary inquiries when they're asked about this, is there anybody else that could do this job for us, because we don't really want it.
I see. Is there anything else we should know?
Well, I think, there's lots of interesting things in this case. Henry's done a brilliant job of setting them out.
Let's not get carried away.
What I would say is that, at least in the case of the Christopher Harborne donation, what I noticed over the weekend is, or gift, whatever you want to call it, is that it seems at least a little bit to me that Nigel Farage is softening his stance on whether he ought to have declared that gift. Because in an interview over the weekend, he did say, effectively, well, maybe I didn't fill in a piece of paper. If that's the worst thing I've ever done, then sue me, essentially. So it does seem like, at the very least in the Christopher Harborne case, Nigel Farage is softening his stance as to whether he ought to have declared it. Some people would say that the calling of the by-election in the first place was an admission of that, because the ultimate punishment was probably going to be a by-election anyway.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Sam Power, bringing it in back, well, almost bang on time as well. We'll blame Henry for the slight delay to the news bulletin. Dr. Sam Power, they're a lecturer in politics at the University of Bristol, and for our purposes this afternoon, an expert in political financing and electoral regulation, and on it goes. The time now is 12:02.
James O'Brien on LBC.
6 minutes after 12 is the time, and we go again. This is our doorstep, isn't it, effectively, continental Europe. The idea that Bordeaux is braced to evacuate 270,000 residents with wildfires just 9 miles from the city. That was the state of play last night. It may well have developed since I came on air this morning. The mayor of Cestas, just south of Bordeaux, told the BBC, this is the fire of the century. Spain has less than 24 hours to get infernos under control before the temperatures go back up again. There's another round of excessive heat coming. How many people do you think have already been... Well, this was last night. I haven't got the number for today, but how many people do you think have been evacuated already in France and Spain by sort of the time the newspapers went to press last night? How many people? Do you know? 260,000 people evacuated. Do you know, it may sound odd today, but we've done phone-ins in the past about what that means. Have you ever stopped to wonder what that means? We do it in this country more with floods than fires at the moment, but, watch this space. And when somebody says 500 people have been evacuated from the Somerset town, what does it actually mean? That's not the phone-in today. I'm just pointing out that these words sometimes need a lot more context than is routinely or traditionally provided. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm avoiding coverage of this story. And I don't know why. So there's another 40 degrees centigrade heatwave heading in this direction. The blazes in Bordeaux are currently, or the blazes in France, forgive me, near Bordeaux, are currently, and you might want to sit down for this. This is France. This is where you go on school trips. This is the only country most people born in the 1970s, the only foreign country most people born in the 1970s had ever visited before the age of 18, or before they were old enough to go on a jolly to Magaluf or on a family holiday to Greece. This is France. This is not the Middle East. This is France and Spain. France and Spain. Did you ever do that as a kid? Did you ever compete? Count the countries that you'd actually... My nephews used to be obsessed with this. How many countries have you actually visited? And I'd sort of take the lead, because I once caught a bus to Amsterdam, which meant that I went through Belgium, so I could put Belgium on my list, even though I never got off the bus. You remember France and Spain always came first, right? Unless you're a clever clogs and you'd say, well, I've been to Scotland, Wales. But France and Spain, you were more likely to visit France if you were not of an Irish heritage than you were to visit Ireland. This is France. How big do you think the current fire is? Or was last night? It's bigger now. 4 times the size of Paris. Now, look, France is a much bigger country than the United Kingdom with a similar sized population. So, it is not the same in one sense. But it is epic. Houses gutted. Entire cities facing potential evacuation. 360,000 people already moved from their homes. Verdant forests razed completely to the ground. Firefighters, 88 of them interviewed in Gironde alone. 240 homes destroyed and rising. 13 people dead in Spain. And it is potentially going to get worse. Farmers, wine growers, tradesmen trying to prevent the blaze reaching Bordeaux. Tourists urged to stay away. This is apocalyptic. We have never seen anything like this in our lives. And I'm looking away. And I know the line is don't look up, but I'm not doing that. I'm not pretending that I'm avoiding the news. I think some of my colleagues are as well. I mean, on this programme, I don't mean other presenters. I just think when we sit down, Eleanor and I, every morning and we talk about what we're going to do on the show, we are both suffering from, what would you call it? What would the word be? What are we suffering from, Eleanor? We're suffering from news avoidance syndrome. Now, part of my problem is I don't know what the phone-in is, really. I don't know. What is the phone-in? I mean, the idea of conducting a phone-in, to be fair, I was quite early on this. I remember telling people who were minded to ring radio stations, insisting that man-made climate change was a hoax, that they might as well ring in and and tell me that the moon landings were a hoax, or tell me that up isn't up and down isn't down. I mean, the indulgence. The Daily Telegraph ran an article this week by one columnist saying, of course, climate change is real, and people were celebrating. Because the Daily Telegraph historically was the biggest obstacle to science in the British media. The late Nigel Lawson would often adorn its pages with entirely science-free nonsense. And then he'd be invited onto the Today programme on Radio 4 to share it. And in one corner of the studio, you'd have a representative of scientific consensus. And in the other corner of the studio, you'd have Nigel Lawson. And they treated it, this was the great, my theory, there'd have been no Brexit without climate change. Because the failure of journalism during Brexit was an absolute carbon copy, if you pardon the pun, of the failure of journalism during discussions about climate science. It's what Emily Maitlis calls the Minford paradigm. You'd have pretty much every economist worthy of the name convinced that Brexit was going to be economically damaging to the United Kingdom, and then you'd have a bloke called Patrick Minford arguing that it wasn't. So you had to book him, because you needed 2 guests. You had to book him. And it was the same with climate science, except they couldn't really find scientists. So they ended up booking people like Nigel Lawson to argue with the scientists. So we stopped doing that a long time ago. I mean, it was pointless, really. It would be literally like arguing with cheese. And so I didn't really join in the celebrations earlier this week when one Daily Telegraph columnist wrote an article belatedly acknowledging that, oh yeah, science is real, science accepts, science exists. I mean, it is. I know I spend an awful lot of time pointing out the people who will never admit they were wrong about Brexit, or Boris Johnson, or Liz Truss, or austerity, or Donald Trump, or Benjamin Netanyahu, or whatever the list may be, and we put climate change on the list as well. So maybe I should be a bit more gracious. And when one of these characters says, "Oh yeah, maybe I was wrong about that. Actually, sorry lads, we should be a bit more gracious." But if you're admitting that you were wrong about something when the evidence that you were wrong was absolutely enormous, and in this case literally visible from space, it's not even a figure of speech, then we're back to Richard Tice as well, aren't we? He's another one who was still insisting that the climate change science is not... And he knows lots of scientists who would argue with that. He just can't tell you who any of them are. And he did an interview on Bloomberg recently where he got really stroppy with the interviewer for having the audacity to ask him to name a scientist. The mind boggles. So maybe that's why I don't want to talk about it. Why? It can't just be because I can't think of a phone-in, and I don't want to conduct the stupid phone-ins about whether or not it's real, whether or not cheese is cheese, whether or not eggs is eggs. I don't think anyone does that anymore, do they? No one does that, I don't think. And if they do, it shouldn't actually be allowed any more than the BBC, and I was guilty of this myself, the BBC should have been treating Brexit from an economics point of view as if it was a 50-50 argument, or even a 52-48 argument, when it was about a 99-1 argument, or a 999-1, or a 9,999-1 argument, and they treated it as if both things were equal. Extreme ground heat is sparking an updraft of hot, fast-rising air filled with smoke and ash. This is known as a pyrocumulonimbus. And I don't want to talk about it. But we have to. And that's my first question. Why do we have to? 0345 606 0973. I know the answer to that question, but I want to hear it from you. And on a less thoughtful note, what's the point of talking about it? Won't change anything, won't save any lives. What's the point? I've got a clever clogs question for you, which is whether or not having a conversation about the things we need to do to accommodate the fact that we live now in measurably hotter countries. Did something similar to that, I think, before I went away on holiday. Did I get back? I got back from holiday and I was wanging on about awnings. Do you remember? It was only a couple of weeks ago. Awnings. I love that word. Awnings. It feels like defeatism. I've got this weird fear in the back of my brain that if we do conversations, if you and I have a conversation about how we're going to cope better in much hotter countries that we now live in, should we all be moving north? Should I be buying a place in Scotland? Should I be investing in awnings like Keith has to keep the heat off the windows in your house or your flat? It's an admission of defeat. It's like, oh well, we didn't manage to stop it, so now we're just going to have to cut our cloth accordingly. When really we should have stopped it. But we didn't. Why? Why do we need to talk about it? I know that we do, and I'm going to try. You might not ring me. But why do we need to talk about it? 0345 606 0973. There'll be no justice. Another parallel with Brexit, although the stakes here are infinitely higher, there'll be no justice. They're probably all in the House of Lords now, thanks to Boris Johnson, all the journalists that have dedicated their lives to arguing against science or arguing for Brexit. They'll face no justice. The only justice they'll face is the justice, or rather the consequences faced by all of us. As in, you will pay the price for living in a planet that's on fire. Literally on fire. The sky is ablaze in France. France! A place, the only language any of us were ever taught to speak apart from English. Le facteur est dans le jardin. Le feu est dans le ciel. And I am sitting in London with a moderately popular radio programme and a responsibility to you to keep you abreast of all the major developments in the world, and I don't want to talk about it. What day is it today? Tuesday. Didn't touch on it yesterday, barely mentioned it. It's not as if we've been doing daft stuff, is it? Nearly did an hour on the appeal of birdwatching as a way of marking the passing of the late and sainted Bill Oddie. But we're not doing that. What's going on? Why don't I want to talk about it? Why don't I want to talk about it? That's it. Actually, that's the question. 0345 606 09. Well, it's not, is it, on this programme? There's always another one. Why don't I want to talk about it? Why do I have to?
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 20 minutes after 12, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I mean, historically, I'd say, what's it like to be there? And I would like to know. What's it like to be there? In France or Spain, as these flames are licking up, licking at your doorstep, either literally or metaphorically. What is going on? What is it like to be in Bordeaux at the moment? 0345 6060 Hang on. 0345 6060 Actually, if you can't speak English, there's not much point ringing me because I've just used up all my French. But you take my point, and if you can't speak English, then you're unlikely to be listening to this programme and understanding what I'm talking about at the moment. But I don't want to talk about it. But I know that I have to. Why? Why don't I want to talk about it, and why do I have to? Kieran's in Canterbury. Kieran, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First of all, I'd like to thank you for talking about this and bringing it up. And I think I've got kind of answer to both your questions. I think I'll probably answer the second one first.
Yes.
I went to watch the national emergency briefing that was shown around the country.
No, I need to get to this. I was supposed to, and then I went on holidays. A lad called Simon is sorting it out, one of the co-founders. I think he rang us. Anyway, go on. What did you learn?
Yeah. No, it's absolutely brilliant. And but the thing that really, really stuck out to me from that was that they said that 83% of people surveyed said they were concerned about climate change. But they also said that 78% of MPs actually underestimate the level of public concern.
Yeah.
So to me, it's really important to have this conversation because the MPs need to learn how much people actually do care about it. Because people aren't saying anything, and I'm going to come on to that now. I think the reason, like, maybe you don't want to talk about it, others don't want to talk about it as much, is because as soon as I got home, I posted on my social media in a local group and on my personal page about it. And, like, because I was like, I thought, everyone needs to know that we care about this, so we need to actually show the government that we care about this. So if you care about this, get your message out.
You're talking about
local MP.
You're talking about climate change in general. I'm talking about these fires.
Well, sorry, I guess I'll get to my point a little bit quicker. So I got back on both was people from probably the right wing saying that, like, we need to care more about immigration, England's not England anymore, and stuff like that. And
really?
That kind of, and it basically devolved into like an argument about immigration from people that I didn't even, it wasn't really me involved in the conversation. It just set off this trigger of people talking about immigration and how we should care about that more than someone said, like, we should care about that more than, like, cows farting in a field and stuff like that. And then that anger starts on both sides and stuff like that. And the reason I'm saying that is because, to me, the two are completely entwined and interlinked. And we're seeing that now because these forest fires are horrendous and people are evacuating. And, eventually evacuation becomes climate migration because people can't live in the places they used to live. People can't grow crops in the places they used to grow crops. So what happens is they have to then migrate into places where they can grow these crops. And what happens then? There's more migration, there's more immigration, there's more conflict because of that. So the reason it's important to talk about this is because we need our governments to work together and we need to decide what type of society are we going to be. How are we going to adapt to this? Because this is coming, this is happening now, it's starting. How are we going to adapt to this? Are we going to be a compassionate, empathic society? And are we going to look after those that are fleeing from the climate crisis, the fires that are being caused by it? Or are we going to shut off and are we going to start fighting and trying to protect, quote unquote, our land to stop these people migrating? And is it just going to devolve into an absolute mess? Well, if we do nothing, it's probably going to be the latter. So we need our governments to work together to work out what we're going to do about this. And that's why I believe it's so important that we talk about it. And thank you for doing so.
Well, wow. I didn't mean to hurry you. I just thought you'd maybe overlook the fact that I'm thinking specifically about the fires at the moment. But what you're reminding of us of quite brilliantly is that these are not local. I mean, they are localised, but they're simultaneously not localised. That's the problem, isn't it? Maybe the longer you look at it and the more you talk about it, the more scared you become about A, potentially powerlessness, but B, consequences as well. What's going to happen?
100%.
So talking about it is actually creating more problems, because in order to solve problems, you have to acknowledge them and shout them from the rooftops.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really scary, this.
It is really scary. And that's why I applaud your bravery.
It's not brave. No, don't be daft. You're very kind, but this isn't brave. I mean, I kind of have to talk about it. I think even Nick talked about it this morning. You can't not talk about an event on this scale in a country as close to us as France. I'm interested in this visceral reluctance that I personally feel, and what that means on the bigger picture. And part of it is probably that idea of this being, like an iceberg, when just a tiny bit of the iceberg is poking above the sea, and the massive majority, 90% of the iceberg, is of course below the sea level and going all the way down to the ocean floor. Not with all iceberg, use a mountain as a better example, in the sea, an island. If I don't look at the little bit that's poking above the sea level, then I don't need to look at the rest of it. I don't need to acknowledge the existence of the rest of it.
Yeah. So we need to look at where this is actually leading, and individuals can't do anything about it. But you've got the most listened to show, whatever it is in history or in the world or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. In the history of the world. It's not even the most listened to show in this building, mate. It's got all the musos knocking me into a cocked hat. But again, it's not much use. I don't know. You sit here and you just sort of think, What?
It is, because I've written to my MP, and she's written back and said, I don't think that, I don't want to show this to the world. I don't want everyone to see it. And I said, well, what are you doing? And she was like, oh, well, I helped with local cleanup of rubbish dumping. And I kind of was like, well, that's, great. Thanks for doing that. But, and this is yesterday. I wrote the response. So I've basically said to her everything I said to you. And I said, are you going to push Andy Burnham on this? Because this is what we need. And with, everything he's done so far, other stuff you've been talking about this morning, fantastic. But this, I think the problem is that it feels to me that climate change, and I think a lot of other people, that climate change is going, if we don't deal with climate change, none of the other stuff's going to matter. And it doesn't matter whose skeleton ends up sitting on the Iron Throne.
Flipping heck. And that is... and that is also going to be part of it, isn't it? I mean, we've got it in Scotland as well, actually. The Cairngorms, unrecognisable after 12 days of cataclysmic wildfires. Scott in Brentford, hello, mate, is understandably cross or confused about why we're not discussing that. I think the short answer is because it's not a threat to humans on anything like the scale the fires in France and Spain are. But that's just for now, isn't it? I mean, you've got parts of the United Kingdom that are... Caledonian pinewood forest, which has got trees that are 300 years old, only being saved by bulldozers. The sky glowing an eerie orange. It's just okay. What's different about us then? What's in terms of you're running towards the story, and I'm still tempted to run away from it. What is it a character issue? Are we just wired differently? Are you more attuned to things than I am?
Well, I think it's probably your position. You've got many eyes and ears on you.
And I like to do stuff at work that has a visible destination. I like I like callers that make me go, oh yeah, that's what we should be doing, or that. Whereas with this, it's almost too huge to process. No, it doesn't, does it? Flipping it.
For the difference between us is you've got the platform. I'm passionate about it, so I've called into the platform because you opened it up. That's it, really.
Yeah, well, thank you for calling in, but I could be you and still have the platform. I could feel what you feel and still have the platform. I'd have to be careful. I couldn't do it all day, every day, because people would tune out, and that is the worst of all possible worlds, because you'd be shouting into an empty room almost. But I could easily feel what you feel. I just don't, and I'm still confused as to why I don't. So you said lovely things about the show, and I'm very grateful to you, but you're being too kind to me. I could be a passionate climate change activist and still a moderately successful radio presenter, and I'm not. I'm a moderately successful radio presenter who knows I need to talk about this but still doesn't really want to. And I don't get that. I don't understand that. The other question we're obviously asking this hour is, what's it like there? What's it actually like there? Because the thing I nearly said to Kieran but didn't was that even if this was Birmingham or Brentford or Bolton or anywhere else in the United Kingdom that begins with B, I don't know. I would feel differently, wouldn't I? If it was land that I knew well that was on fire, would that change? It would. I don't know. Dominic Ellis has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 12:34. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I mean, Gunnersbury Park caught fire last week. Did you know that? Gunnersbury Park is within walking distance of where I live, and I don't really go on very long walks in this weather. and it was contained and it was dealt with, but it was a consequence of the excess heat and the incredible tinder dry ground that we are all walking on at the moment. And what would happen if... I just find it extraordinary that Bordeaux could face complete evacuation. Can we get me a parallel for a British town that's roughly the same size as Bordeaux, and then we can maybe just focus our minds, because I am guilty of not wanting to talk about it. And yet knowing at the same time that I must. What's going on? Emma is in Bedar in Andalusia. Emma, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, I think because I have first-hand experience of it. I live where the fires were 2 weeks ago, where 13 people died.
Oh, Lord.
And I was evacuated for 3 days.
I hesitate to ask you any questions now, because I'm going to sound trivial and silly, but I will ask you anyway, because that's where my curiosity is taking me. Where do you go when you're evacuated? What did you do for 3 days?
We were very lucky. We had friends who immediately, literally saw the fire from where they lived and said, come to us. Other people were told to go to a village hall, basically, in the nearest safe town. But at the time, you don't think about what you're going to do next. You just think about what you're going to do now. And that's just flee.
In fear?
Yes, because we didn't get any alerts. So the only reason we knew to run, we live in a little bowl valley, 2 kilometres from the main village.
Right.
And my husband got a Jeep and drove up the hill opposite because we could see smoke. And he walkie-talkied back and said, get out, we've got to get out. The flames are racing up the hill.
Oh, my days.
We had a 6 to 8 kilometre drive with the sun going along a one-track lane, along a hilltop running parallel to a firewall that turned out to be 5 kilometres long. And at some point, that fire was close enough to our cars to, feel it.
Just to feel the heat, simply.
Yeah. I had 2 dogs in my car going crazy. And we were just trying to not panic and drive as fast as a one-track hilltop lane allows you to drive.
I mean, everybody listening is wondering how scared you were, but that sounds again like a bit of a stupid question. But so I'll ask you: did you fear the worst? Did you think because if you can see a wall of fire and you are essentially trying to outrun it almost, that's terrifying.
Yes, so at one point when the road turned and we were heading directly towards the flames, I was screaming to my husband, who was in a second car on a walkie-talkie, we're heading towards this. And he said, look, the road does a sharp left, we're going to be okay. But yes, it was absolutely terrifying. But I kind of think what I wanted to say really is I'm now watching these fires in other places. And when I watch it on the news, even I feel divorced from it, having been through a fire. Right. And I think it's because it's so vague, the way it's reported, and it's very procedural. But on the ground, I can tell you, out of my window, I'm looking at an ash-filled hellscape. There's nothing there. I go out...
You're back at home now, and this is what was previously a lovely corner of Andalusia is now a sort of charred mess.
Yes. And we go walking this morning, we walked our dogs, and there are burnt tortoises lying dead on the floor. And
why does that hit me more than some of the other things you said? Why we're such a weird species?
I don't know, and I have felt, obviously I've known some of the people that have died. They've not been friends, I'll say, but I know them in the community. It's a small community.
Yes, I understand.
And I see houses charred, and we have a family in one of our casitas, which is an annex, who have been with us since the fires because they can't go home yet. And so everybody, nothing is normal. That's the other thing. You think flee from a fire, but when you go back, your house might still be there, but you can't live in it. And that goes on for weeks and weeks whilst insurers is sorted out. And you have animals appearing out of nowhere. So an interesting thing here is when you get a fire up to your house, all the lizards come into your house. Okay. So people are putting down bowls of water in their house for lizards that are coming in because there's nothing to eat or drink out there for them.
Holy moly. And yet, I'm slightly stunned to hear you say that you can sit in the scenario you've just described. For the sake of argument, you've got a house full of lizards and everything is covered in ash, and yet when you watch on the telly what's happening in Bordeaux, you still manage to feel a sense of detachment from it. And would it be fair to say you don't really want to watch it or not?
No, I kind of do, because a lot went wrong in our area, which is why so many died. And I watch it because I just hope that it's not going to go wrong there. And I watch it. I don't know. I feel drawn to watch it, but it also obviously doesn't feel as immediate as what we've experienced.
Well, it isn't. I mean, logically, it isn't, is it? I mean, no. But you know more about what it would be like to be in the path of that fire than I do, and hopefully ever will.
Yeah, I think it's the reporting. I think maybe they need to grind it down to very simple, small human stories because, when I get a video up in my feed of a firefighter pulling a huge mast in away from a fire, you can feel that very viscerally, whereas looking at a big wall of fire on the news and having lots of stats about kilometres and fire perimeters and this, that and the other, it doesn't hit you in the gut the way that these tiny little simple human stories did. Like one of our friends who at the last minute had to make a decision, what do I do about my donkey? Wow. So he opened the gate and just went run, and hopefully he hoped to see him again. And tell you what, a few days later he turned up at a bar in the village wanting a drink. So
the donkey did.
The donkey did.
Oh, how lovely! How lovely!
Yeah.
It's funny because I think of all the things you said, including that phrase, a 5-kilometre wall of fire. It was the tortoises that actually stopped me in my tracks. That's just not right, but it's just true, isn't it? You're right. Sometimes we respond more to the digestible than we do to the indigestible.
Yeah, I think so, and I just think it needs to be broken down to that, because that's, I think, thing people can. If I think of my life back in the UK, I'd be able to make that parallel, be able to think, oh my God, what if suddenly little foxes and rabbits were singed and running into my garden? What if? And I think maybe that would help, but obviously it does feed into the wider thing of climate change, because I can tell you we've got olives, except for 2 summers ago our harvest completely failed because it's getting hotter and drier for longer. So this is
too hot for olives.
Fire prevention.
Too hot for olives.
Our fire, exactly, too hot. Not enough water. Just died.
I'm so glad you're okay, and I appreciate not everybody in your corner of the country is, and that's heartbreaking. What happens next? Do you know? Because you mentioned insurance and the people that you're currently looking after, but what happens next? You just wait for things to grow back, I suppose?
I mean, oddly, they're already growing back. The esparto grass across the mountains, there are already green shoots coming back from the water that was dropped by planes.
Wow.
So it's in a year's time, you won't know anything has even happened. And that's the danger.
Yeah.
As soon as you know nothing's happened, it's easy to forget.
As soon as, and I've seen that in Greece, actually. I've seen, because wildfires in Greece are more common, I think, historically than in France, certainly, and probably Spain. And friends of mine there have pointed out, in the course of a single season, a single year sometimes, the way things grow back. But my days, this is just, that's part of the problem, I think, Emma. It's just so huge that the temptation to look away or not think about it is sometimes close to irresistible.
And we have fantastic fire prevention here. You can only burn anything 9 months of the year. 3 months of the year.
Yeah.
And you have to have a license from the town hall, and you have to give the grid reference for where your bonfire is going to be, and you have to phone them before you have it. We're not bad at fire prevention. In fact, in this part of Spain, they've probably got the best fire prevention around, and we couldn't prevent fires, and they can't prevent them. So something needs to happen on a wider scale to stop this heating.
Yeah, I mean, it is simultaneously simple and yet the most complicated thing that, in some ways, humanity as a whole has ever faced. I mean, why not? Why can't we pull together? And of course now you still have agitation to continue the exploitation of and the dependence on fossil fuels. And guess what? That heats things up. 12:45 is the time. And there are no simple answers. There are simple answers, but they don't make much sense. Emma, thank you, and do take care. That's an extraordinary testimony, frankly, from somebody truly in the front line of what we are seeing on our screens and hitting so many marks of resonance, so many moments of resonance, both in terms of descriptions and analysis. Just on a personal level, because I am intrigued by my own reactions to these stories, Tony's been in touch. He is a former senior lecturer in mental health at Birmingham City University. He says, James is clearly acting to preserve his own sanity. It's an ego defense mechanism. James has totally accepted that climate change is inevitable, and this includes the consequences, i.e., will talking about it or thinking about those consequences help him at all? I share James's worries, says Tony. And that, of course, accommodates the fact that they do, if we as a species, as a population, we do everything we can possibly do to make things better starting now, it would still be the case that what we're seeing is inevitable in this moment. 12:46 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:49 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Of course, one of the major reasons why you need to talk about this stuff, and an incredible response to Emma there in Andalusia. Also, an awful lot of people recommending that emergency briefing film, which I must get around to watching that. I do apologise for not having done so sooner. I got the email off the fellow who invited me, but it coincided pretty much with my departure on holiday. And of course, I went in an aeroplane when I went on holiday, at which point some chin strokers go, well, you're not really concerned about this. Not the daftest message I've received today. I'm afraid that was from you, Debs. Maybe you don't want to talk about it, wrote Debs, because you eat meat and dairy. Let me have a little think about that. Is the reason why I don't want to talk about the inferno in Bordeaux because I eat beef burgers and milk? Hang on, Debs. Wait there, Debs. Wait a sec. No, it's not because I eat meat and dairy that I don't want to talk about the burning of Bordeaux. And also, speaking of the importance of words, I shouldn't have said digestible after Emma talked about the dead tortoises, because a few of you have put 2 and 2 together and come up with 5 on that front. I knew you would as well. As soon as it came out of my mouth, you could probably hear me going, that wasn't the correct word to use. But why are we affected by some things more than others is a question for the ages. Not everybody is, of course. Some people are more or less immune entirely to fact, evidence and science, and that's the reason why the rest of us want to talk about it. You may have thought I was exaggerating earlier when I suggested that Richard Tice, who is, as our guest earlier explained, both a donor to and a politician in Reform UK. He's always got a lot to say about climate science. Here he is on Bloomberg's Zero podcast earlier this month.
You can't present me with a whole load of graphs that I can't read, that may well be bullshit.
Okay.
Okay. and put this out there. So this terminates now. It's end of podcast. This is ridiculous.
Okay.
I'm sorry. You cannot seriously think this is a sensible way to conduct a podcast. We're not doing it. We're ending now.
All I'm saying is this is the summary for policymakers.
Yeah, and I don't agree with any of it. And you can't present something to me, right? And expect me to comment on it when I haven't read it. I don't know what you're talking about in terms of what you're presenting.
Right.
And one of the foundations of the IPCC's very ethos in the last 20 or 30 years, they've just abandoned.
Where does he... What party did... Do you remember that councillor a few weeks ago who was complaining that they couldn't... It wasn't fair to expect them to do council business because they didn't understand anything? What party was that councillor from? Do you remember? I played you the clip and she was sort of going, it's not fair, we don't understand anything. You can't expect us to vote, we don't understand anything. It's quite popular now in politics, that position. I can't remember what party she belonged to. Tice obviously is a member of Reform UK and he doesn't think you should ask him about anything that he doesn't understand, which I suppose sets him up for some of the shortest interviews in political history. You could only ask me about things I understand. Okay. Well, at least he's got some scientists on side.
Your view on climate science, which is that thousands of scientists disagree that net zero is not the way to tackle climate change. Who are the scientists who are advising you on that? Can you name any, the thousands of scientists?
I've got lots of people advise me. I don't list all my private advisors with regard to anything, whether it's net zero, whether it's housing policy, whether it's industrial policy. People who advise me from all different sides, who are coming at me from all different angles, very often opposing, and that's great, because that's how you listen and learn. That's who we are.
I just want to check something, all right? That's great, because that's how you listen and learn. So when people oppose you, that's great, because that's how you listen and learn.
You can't present me with a whole load of graphs that I can't read, that may well be bullshit.
Okay.
And put this out there. So
but he's disagreeing with you,
now.
Richard.
It's end of podcast.
Hey?
This is ridiculous.
That's how you listen and learn.
I'm sorry, you cannot seriously think this is a sensible way to conduct a podcast. We're not doing it. We're ending now.
All I'm saying is this is the summary for policymakers.
Yeah, and I don't agree with any of it.
But you want to be a policymaker.
Something to me. Right? And expect me to comment on it when I haven't read it. I don't know what you're talking about in terms of
so
what you're presenting.
Listen and learn when people...
And one of the foundations of the IPCC's very ethos in the last 20 or 30 years, they've just abandoned.
I don't understand anything, but I've got very strong opinions. And actually, there are lots of scientists that agree with me.
Your view on climate science, which is that thousands of scientists disagree that net zero is not the way to tackle climate change. Who are the scientists who are advising you on that? Can you name any, the thousands of scientists?
I've got lots of people advise me. I don't list
all my
private advisors with regard to anything, whether it's
just one. Zero, go on, come on, Richard.
Policy,
just one little scientist, just
policy,
one wafer-thin scientist.
People who advise me from all different sides, who are coming at me from all different angles, very often opposing, and that's great, because that's how you listen and learn.
We just heard how you deal with opposing ideas, Richard. We literally just heard you threaten to walk out of a podcast because you are not bright enough to understand the graphs that have been put in front of you very neatly and accurately labelled. But anyway, on we go. On we go. Jane's in Weymouth. Jane, back to reality. What would you like to say?
Oh, God. They make me so cross.
Yeah, me both.
Sorry. Yeah. Thank you for taking my call, James.
You're very welcome.
First-time terrified caller, a long-time listener. The fires, we have to talk about them. I know vaguely that area of France.
Right.
Very beautiful. My mother-in-law, my much-loved and a very dear mother-in-law, lives in a little town called Condom in Le Gers, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours from Bordeaux.
Okay.
And I'm terrified of the fires reaching her. I think it's probably unlikely at the moment, but I'm terrified. She lives in one of the oldest buildings in Condom, big thick walls, and what's happening with her is that the buildings there, the old buildings, are behaving like storage.
Heaters.
Yes, those, and so the buildings are getting hotter and hotter, and she can't go out. She's 94, 95 in October. Believe me, she's amazing. She's got better social life than I have, but at the moment she can't go out because of the heat. But she had to brave the heat yesterday to go and get yet another fan for the flat, because the flat is just heating up, and it's worrying. It's incredibly worrying, this situation. I know somebody who calls the lovely David Attenborough Dr. Death.
Really?
Because he talks about climate change.
Oh, dear.
Anybody, and I just think,
what's wrong with these people?
I don't know.
Well, that's a phone in for another day. Do you think that I think it has, otherwise you wouldn't have chosen to talk to me about this particular angle of your experience. It's because your mother-in-law is so close to it that it's resonating so powerfully with you.
Yeah, it is. I'm terrified that she's got quite a lot of friends in that area, French and English. She's been there 40 years. I'm just terrified. I'm terrified.
And that's why we have to keep on talking about it.
Yeah, it's these fires also, I heard on the news last night, are creating their own climate.
I've read that as well. I've seen that. I said a fancy Latin word about half an hour ago that I probably didn't pronounce correctly, but it's about what happens when the ash rises upwards and the sky is up there. Have they got any protection in Condom?
At the moment, I don't think so. I'm not sure. I haven't talked about that with her. She feels that they're okay at the moment. I'm just worried that it's going to go across.
Well, I'm looking at it on the map now, because I wondered if I'd misheard you. So it does look as if she'll be okay. But what you remind us of is that the situation she's living in is becoming close to unbearable, even if she doesn't have flames.
No, it's reaching the old building.
Yeah, of course it is. And I mean, no one's going to be able to fix this in a heartbeat. I'm sure. But anyway, for what it's worth, in terms of reassurance, I think that it looks to me as if everything will be okay, but only in the context of the fires, not in the context of continuing climate change. Jane, take care, won't you?
With Emma's call, I couldn't believe that.
No.
With the animals, But anyway,
I know.
Thank you for taking.
Well, thank you as well, because that is it, isn't it? We'll be able to do it again, and we will find ways into it. It is coming up to 1 o'clock. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I don't know how, though. I can only get away with that once or twice, saying, why don't I want to talk about it? You're not going to tune into that every day, are you? Even with my levels of self-obsession, that would become quickly unbearable. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can also stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinions. You can listen to a range of podcasts, including James O'Brien Daily, the best bits from my LBC show every day. So do download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Sawbrick. But now, standing in for Sheila Fogarty, it's Asma Mir.
James O'Brien on LBC.